Hey guys. This is part 7 of What If Naruto Went Back in Time but Ended Up in the Wrong Timeline. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 64. Conclusion. The three tomos spun in her eye at a steady pace, the dark marks almost blurring together in her iris, as the princess of the Uchiha clan focused on the target before her sight. The illusions she weaved over the weak minds of ignorant combatants that looked directly into the red eyes were almost an afterthought, an extra layer of defense to go along with the storm of elemental power Naruto was whirling around her to keep her safe. A stumble here, a slow reaction there, a kunai aimed too far above or to the side. Most had, by now, learned not to approach the versatility of three elements, all of which were readily available everywhere on this battlefield, had gotten the message across that an unorganized attack wasn't going to cut it. The enemy wasn't the issue, not anymore. Sheer panic and a command structure she'd effectively decapitated meant they were searching for orders, trying to decide between a retreat and a committed attack. It would take them some time, especially now with the full force that had once been protecting Tsunade diving in, almost heedlessly into the fray of enemies to try and get to the two of them, protect them. 3 of the Konoha Kurambu had already gone down in the chaos, leaving just 5. Tsunade was all but bulldozing through anything that got in her way, as Guy and the one remaining guardian tried to push with her. From there, the battle devolved into a seething, writhing chaos, but she didn't let it distract her. They had one target, one person they still had to eliminate and break the enemy morale. These bloodlines did not make them invincible, did not give some magical invulnerability. Her chakra reserves, and Naruto's too, could be expended, especially with the way he must have been burning through even his considerable reserves, to maintain her defense. The Jinchuriki stood almost at the edge of the battle, staring at the two of them as one would stare at a building about to collapse over one's head. Naruto suddenly appeared at her side, soaked to the bone, hair matted down to his skull and face. The Jinchuriki's body began to disperse, the solid armor and sheer muscle mass becoming little more than wisps of steam that they'd never be able to destroy. Naruto's hands flew through his seals. Mokutan! Again, the wood grew out of the ground around them, and wrenched back into corporeal shape. She saw the Jinchuriki gasp in pain, stumbling in disorientation before she and Naruto rushed, pressing the attack. The thunder of horse hooves beating against wet, soft earth was all one could hear along the old road. The beasts had been ridden nearly to death, rushing for hours at their top speed. It was likely that more than one of the animals would die at this rate, if they reached their destination at all. But then they slowed down, the breakneck pace becoming something more reasonable before finally stopping entirely. The men were looking around, searching the grasslands through the gloom of the barely there light of an approaching sunrise. "Why do we stop?" someone called in the back. The man in the front answered. "Can't you smell that?" There was a ripple of confusion through the group, the samurai looking at each other in askance before the wind turned and the confusion became realization and noises of disgust. The smell was immediate, overpowering and familiar to each on some level. Rotting flesh. Too strong to be a stray animal. This was more. With a pull on the reins, the lead samurai turned his horse, following the scent over the lip of a small hill to the west, the clomping of horse hooves behind him. The smell grew stronger the closer he got. The stink of wet grass and mud gave the stench a cloying feel, like a physical film of filth falling over them. As the man and the rest of the samurai rose over the crest of the hill, their dread turned to a grim, quiet horror. There were dead. Many of them. Too many to count at a glance, 100, 200 perhaps. Days and days of rainfall had turned the corpses into a sickly combination of greens and blacks, the red armor straining to contain the bloated flesh. Flies buzzed angrily, maggots crawled chewed through bits of flesh, eyes and mouths. The lead man could not recognize a single one, but the red armor was unmistakable. They were from Hai no Kuni, of the daimyo's own house. The question hung heavy in the air, thick and weighted. It was someone else who spoke and gave the answer. This ambush wasn't just targeting the return party. The lead samurai swallowed, a growing dread in the pit of his stomach. "We need to leave." The words were harsh, almost barked out, and all were immediately in agreement, realizing the danger. Nothing could be done for the dead, they didn't even know who was dead. The man pulled at the reins, forcing his horse to obey before he grabbed onto the reins of another man beside him who seemed to still be staring frozen at the array of corpses. We need to move, he insisted. He almost didn't catch it, almost didn't hear it over his own voice and the hiss of the rain, but suddenly, the samurai turned, drawing his sword with a clang of steel striking steel, a kunai knife twirling through the air before it hit the ground, falling with a thump. The enemy seemed to form out of the rain itself, stepping out of the screen of falling water, rebreather masks covering their features, dark clothes encasing them like shrouds. Aim ninja. He heard the woman before he saw her. They thought you wouldn't come through here, he told us differently. The voice was in front of them, but the samurai's eyes swiveled back, turning to look at the mound of bodies where a kunoichi with stark blue hair stood amidst the dead. I know Kuni has no quarrel with Amage-Kure or your petty lord. The man snarled as the men around him drew their own weapons, spreading out the formation to avoid getting swept up in a large area attack. Leave now and we'll forget your indiscretion, he warned. The woman did not smile, she did not gloat or taunt, she simply brushed her hair behind her ear with one hand. Then she was gone, practically on top of him. He swung his blade and met her kunai thrust with a deft parry before another weapon was positioned to lodge itself in his throat. Fast. He moved, just as fast, faster than a normal man should have, and the blade punched straight downward into the spine of his horse, severing it with a gut-churning crunch of wedged bones cracked like eggs. The beast fell with a cry, not even having the ability to move in pain one final time, its legs and body collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. His feet found purchase on the muddy ground, sword at the ready, the woman standing just beyond his reach. Why don't you drop that silly thing? You're not fooling anyone anymore. With a glare, and trails of wispy black smoke, the red armor of the daimyo's house and concealing helmet melted away, revealing the pale features of the Sannin Orochimaru. Most villages had Jinchuriki. From the 5 great villages to even some of the lesser ones like Takigakure. Jinchuriki were tools. A means to keep the tenuous balance of power in check. Last resort weapons to be unleashed when all other options of conventional warfare were exhausted. Most did not adhere to such caution, because time had eroded the memory of what the monsters truly were. Before the founding of the villages, before sealing arts, before Hashirama, Bijou were beasts of pure destruction made manifest, raw, wild, untamed power that could alter the very landscape of the world based on their whims and fancies. No shinobi could hope to match them when they moved on the warpath. The turtle that resided in the sea had sunk land masses, the Ichibi created the deserts of Sunagakure, the Kyubi had raised mountains, and the Gobi had forced volcanoes to erupt to carve out his home. Jinchuriki were tame things by comparison. But they were still a weapon, a dangerous, fearsome weapon. Naruto could feel his power crashing against Han's. A roiling, seething mass of pure chakra trapped inside the flesh he was forcing him to keep. Every time the Jinchuriki tried to shift into the cloud of steam, the energies he poured through his hijacked bloodline would subjugate the transformation, keep him corporeal, keep him beatable. But that was all he could do. Han was a beast yanking on the chain around his neck, tearing off flesh even as he tore at the hands that held the chain and threatened to break free. If it were anyone else, if it were anyone who did not know a Jinchuriki's chakra, did not have the reserves or, in fact, the sheer stubborn will to do the equivalent of latching on to a red-hot iron brand and refuse to let go, Han probably would have ripped through the restraints, Mokutan or not. Luckily for all of them, it wasn't anyone else, it was him. The pounding of his heart was thunderous, almost loud enough to block out all sound as his chakra strained, like a muscle pulling some impossible weight, tense and ready to rip completely beneath his flesh as he and Itachi surged through the rush of IWA ninja around them. Forcing Han to stay corporeal and screen them from attackers through a constant barrage of elemental ninjutsu while also fighting Han's rising Bijou chakra was rapidly withering away even his considerable reserves. They had to end this fast. Itachi's voice somehow cut through the noise, reaching his ear in barely a whisper. Left, Tsunade and her Anbu are pushing through, giving us an opening, 15 seconds at most. She didn't need to tell him twice. With a thought, almost a relief really, the shield of raw damage fell away to their left side, allowing him the freedom to form a wall, gathering it from the rain, the puddles on the ground, even the clothing, soaked through from the bodies around them, and form what could almost be considered a physical boulder of rushing, swirling water, shoving it through the breach with all the speed he could put behind it towards Han. So focused on breaking through the hold the Mokutan chakra had over his transformation, Han didn't notice until it was simply too late, the crushing surge smashing into him like the fist of an angry god, lifting him off his feet and crashing the red-armored behemoth into one of the wooden pillars, caging him into a physical form. The wood groaned and creaked but did not break. Naruto kept it in place, kept the water holding Iwa's human weapon before a lightning bolt flew from Itachi's hand and straight into the orb, crackling with forks of pure energy that lit up the night with pale, blinding light. Han burst free a second later, sheer physical strength allowing him to brute force his way through the water and pain as electricity danced along his body. The man's eyes glowed with a smoky silver and Naruto felt the chakra clawing at his own like a rabid beast, ripping and tearing, consuming all of the energy he kept pouring into the technique. Han charged the both of them, realizing that he would not be allowed to transform, or call on the bulk of his Biju's chakra, and now, like any cornered animal, he would be at his most dangerous. Itachi stepped in front of him, and he knew those eyes of hers were glowing in the dark. He could feel the rapid staccato layering of her genjutsu over Han's mind, one after the other, and feel just as quickly as the Biju's chakra, Han's, and even his own frayed at the delicate control required, shattering illusion after illusion as fast as Itachi could layer them onto the raging Jinchuriki's mind through eye contact. Han lunged at them, feet crashing into the dirt in front of Itachi hard enough to make the ground quake, tossing a punch that was just a bit too far to the left, allowing the dark-haired Uchiha to easily sidestep it, her kunai planting itself in the Jinchuriki's thick armor plating, explosive tag already burning. She stepped out of the way, revealing Naruto himself. With a snap of his fingers the wind chakra enveloped Han in a burst, too fast for his own chakra to surge and shatter the hastily formed wind vortex. The tag went off, swallowing him in a fireball before the red-armored monster roared in pain. Still wreathed in flame the Jinchuriki's arm lashed out, grabbing Naruto by the scruff of his jacket, and lifting. Naruto cursed, drawing two kunai as he was lifted, wind blades stabbing straight through the forelimb, armor and all, and exploding within the arm like a blender of razor blades as he went over Han's head and was smashed into the ground with all the brutish force the Jinchuriki could put behind the blow. He should have died. The only reason he wasn't was likely due to the sliced knee that had made Han stumble at the last second, courtesy of Itachi. As it was, he saw stars in his eyes, the back of his head throbbed as the world swam and his focus, for a split second, vanished along the array of whirling elements keeping them isolated from the battle beyond. The IWA ninja wasted no time, 4 of them pounced before he could gain his wits again, looking to kill him. One lunged for Itachi, only to get a blow from the back of Han's fist that was intended for her, every rib in his side snapping like twigs. Placing his hand on the ground, a storm of earth spears erupted from the mud, making solid, jagged rock skewer one that was too slow to react while the other 2 avoided the obstacle. Then someone was in their way, an Umbu, one of Sarajiji's guard, a Kunoichi, diving between him and the attackers. Her sword caught one, killing him, too slow for the second, a kunai blade lodging in the woman's throat. She clutched at the wound, one hand rising even as she sucked down a breath that bubbled out from the blood now pouring free from her neck. She stumbled and he could see the strength leaching from her legs before she used the last of it to practically throw herself onto Han's arm, trying to use her own weight to force Han to let him go. It worked. Not because of the strength of it, but because Han released his grip to shove the dying woman off of him before turning to face Itachi, who danced around his heavy, monstrously powerful blows with deft, easy steps. The last man tried to take the killing shot, drawing a new weapon from his pouch as Naruto scrambled to his feet. Itachi's voice filtered through his thoughts. When had she trapped him? Left ankle. The man swung at him and Naruto rolled, hand reaching to the left ankle, drawing out a saman pouch. Ripping 3 of the things free, he plunged them into the man's exposed hip before he had a chance to even realize what was going on. He turned, took 1 step, and fell over, dead or soon to be. Naruto looked, seeing Itachi practically cornered, between his own wall of elemental ninjutsu and Han. "Trust test!" he shouted, hoping she'd get it. She did, crossing her arms and falling straight back. Her body fell into a stone cradle that formed into a cocoon, Han's fist smashing into it, and nearly breaking the nigh unbreakable stone, before he yanked his friend out of his range and back to his side. She leapt out of it, going high into the air before he saw her body disassemble into a murder of dark ravens as Han's demonic chakra surged, breaking through enough to begin to form the barest trace of a shroud around his body. "You're weaker than I thought you'd be," the woman taunted. "The legendary death dealer." Orochimaru's answering smirk was a mocking thing. "You must be quite exceptional then." "I am," she answered with an easy confidence. "But you're not. Tell me, where's the actual Orochimaru? While we're at it, where's your daimyo?" The Sanin's features fell into a frown, a worry visible in his eyes clear through the screen of the genjutsu. The features shifted, becoming flush with color, rounding out to reveal Yuhi Kurenai rather than the Sanin's sharp angles and pale complexion. None of the samurai removed their helmets, each looking, for all intents and purposes, nameless and faceless. The blue-haired Kunoichi's smile was a cruel thing. "I wonder, would you stay so quiet, Magajiro, if it were someone else asking the question?" There was the sound of struggling, shuffling feet and clanking armor, and another Aim came into view through the rainy gloom beside the woman. A man was in front of him, his wrists were bound behind his back, a sack was over his head. With a swift kick to the back of the knee and a shove, the man was pushed down, armored knees scraping against stone and mud. Kurenai had a feeling she knew who that was. When the Kunoichi reached over and pulled the sack off his head, she had her suspicions confirmed. She was now staring at the battered, gagged features of Magajiro Kuta's eldest son, Magajiro Takichio. "How about it, Magajiro?" The woman's voice was smooth, clear as a bell over the hiss of the rain. "You surrender to us, and we hand you your son." Kurenai shook her head. "You'll kill us all," she said, less to answer the question and more to dissuade, a hasty act. "The only reason you're asking is so you can capture him for a public execution later. Amigakure killing the most powerful of the 5 great daimyo would be quite a feather in your cap." The woman eyed her, a lazy swivel of her eye, like a lion discovering a flea nibbling on it. "It would save us the trouble of capturing them all alive and finding him that way. You're the only threat here, and even that is laughable, Kurenai-san. How many do you think you can hold off on your own to help an escape? 3? 4? If I decide to let you? One jounin as a guard is desperate. You have no rescue and no chance, so just make everyone's lives easier at this point." Suddenly, the woman tensed, a knife shimmering into existence at her throat, hand and fingers gripping it, leading to someone behind her. "How about a jounin plus some friends?" The voice was rough, but familiar to Kurenai's ears. As the genjutsu fell away, it revealed, to her utter amazement, the Kazekage of Sunigakure. The rain ninja holding the daimyo's bound son was suddenly wrapped, from head to toe, in a cocoon of sand and then forcibly dragged away before his blood spurted out of the sand like juice bursting from the skin of a squeezed orange. The Aim tensed, drawing weapons and taking defensive formations as the Kazekage's 2 elite guards, along with the 2 jounin sensei and their respective teams, were suddenly surrounding them. Kurenai blinked, baffled. The genjutsu had been crafted so well she hadn't even suspected, and she wondered who it could have been that crafted it. Suna did have more proficient genjutsu users than most villages, a necessary adaptation of their fewer numbers, but this was something far more advanced than she thought they would be capable of. "Since becoming Kage, it has been a long time since I've had to use genjutsu on this scale. I'll have to thank you for the opportunity to practice." Her eyes turned back to the Kazekage, seeing the man grinning under his mask as he held the knife steady at the Kunoichi's throat. The Kunoichi spared a look out of the corner of her eye, over her shoulder, glaring at him. There was no warning, no words. With a lurch forward, the woman sliced open her own throat on the knife, her body dissolving into water before another formed above and behind the Kazekage. The man whirled, their weapons meeting with a clash of steel against steel before all hell broke loose. His bones burned, like red-hot iron rods trapped beneath his flesh. His skin was brittle clay. His muscles were rows of razor wire. He could feel the searing pain scoring the lining of his insides, cooking his flesh, blackening skin and consuming sinew like a flame burning at a wick. His chakra was trapped in the cage of his flesh, pushing, ripping, tearing, but incapable of escaping. Like a cold press, the boy's chakra fell over him in waves, keeping the beast tearing at his insides. He could feel his eyes glowing, boiling water behind his eyelids. Sheer agony through every fiber of his body. The red eyes danced along his vision, warping and twisting perception before he righted himself, found them again and lunged at them again. The boy. He had to kill the boy. For all his life, all Han had was his power, the knowledge that, when push came to shove, he was the bigger monster next to the monsters that called themselves men. He would not let that be taken from him. Not by this child. But every time he drew close, every time he could feel the fight turning in his favor, where his strength and speed was gaining him an edge, the girl was there. Her eyes gleaming in the night, a split second of distraction, wounds, pain, a moment of lost sight, skewed senses, and the threat would slip away from him, and when he tried to corner her, he was there, wind blades, earth walls, surging water, and that cursed, hated, impossible Mokutan holding him at bay, caging his true strength. His bones were rods of burning iron in his flesh, His skin was brittle clay and his muscles were rows upon rows of corded razor wire. The beast ripped and tore at his insides, demanding to be released, to destroy. They would not win. They were not allowed to win. Sand moved through the battlefield like great, winding serpents, rising up from the ground, providing a defensive curtain for all of them, enough of a defense to give them a fighting chance against an enemy that outnumbered them at least 2-1 with more veteran warriors in comparison to the 2 full genin teams present. Temari had 2 people trying to kill her. She knew Gaara would try to protect her and Kankuro more than anyone, but still she found herself being pushed back, the split second of delay between Gaara's awareness of an attack and his reacting to it allowing things to get too close for her comfort. Gaara himself, from what she could see, had no less than 4 AIM shinobi trying to kill him, though the sand shield around him was far, far faster. He still didn't look like he had a hair out of place. The Hai no Kuni samurai, the ungrateful bastards, were barely even joining the fight. The full lot of them had rushed, heedlessly to get to their princeling and were putting more effort into charging through the encirclement than actually joining the battle. The AIM weren't gonna let that happen though. What followed was a chaotic combination of a running retreat/pursuit/high-speed shinobi engagement. With the samurai rushing forward, the AIM rushing to intercept and the Suna shinobi right behind them to try and ease the pressure being put on the Hai no Kuni forces. The fastest pacing of the battle was between her father and the blue-haired Kunoichi. She couldn't even remember her father ever moving that fast, their bodies vanishing between the tall blades of grass with barely a whisper before exploding from somewhere else in a clash of steel, tearing across the battlefield with ninjutsu that looked like it could flatten buildings. And even through all that, Temari saw when the woman decided enough was enough. She turned in the middle of a dodge, avoiding a blow from her father in 1 second and using the same motion to toss a shuriken through the air that twisted and curved with picture-perfect accuracy before it sliced open the throat of the lead horse. The beast crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, its front legs collapsing, its fully armored rider sent flying through the air, hitting the ground in a great crash, his armor clanking as he tumbled across the muddy ground. She wasn't sure if he was dead or injured before the whole collection of horses and samurai were suddenly breaking formation, scattering even as the Kunoichi's attack declared open season on their mounts. Dozens of blades were now slicing through the rain-laden air, killing the beasts, eliminating their only means of escape. The beasts were dead, but the men were alive, even the one that had fallen. The Kunoichi was dead set on capturing Magajiro intact. The battle was joined in full again, no longer a running engagement. Temari took to the skies, feeling the cold knives of the rain pounding across her back and head. The thought occurred to her that she would probably get sick from the wind chill if she survived this before she shoved the absurdity aside. One of the samurai had rushed to the prince, standing beside him, and Temari, from her vantage, noticed the way the samurai were moving, the formation that they took, the full lot of them positioning themselves with a new confidence of people who only had one target to guard. That's him. Then, she noticed something else. It was just a moment, a shadow in the distance of her periphery, something she could see now only because of the light of the coming sunrise. It caught her attention enough for her to turn her head. What she saw made her stomach fall into a gaping pit. People. 7, 8, maybe more she didn't see, moving across the plain. Coming from the north, not the south, it couldn't be friendly reinforcements. More pursuit. The odds were already tilted against them. Too many as it was. The only reason they even had a chance was because of Gaara. They couldn't afford any more, especially not if they were all jounin. Her father had been debating for weeks now as to keep the alliance between Konohagakure and Suna alive. The stunt that Uzumaki kid pulled in the exam had nearly pushed him to the breaking point, or so she'd assumed. But he seemed more than invested now to gain favors, multiple favors if he could, from the daimyo who was clearly at his most vulnerable. He may have just gotten them all killed. She did a quick calculation, judging the weight and chakra drain it would take from her. 10 minutes? That was optimistic, but it was the best course. If they didn't have to commit to his defense, they could all flee, scatter. Some would die, but most could get away. No time for hesitation, no time for thinking it through anymore. She dove. Landing beside the two, she held out her hand. Get the hell on! Neither of them needed to be told twice. With a step and a hop, the armored samurai got on one side of her fan and held his hand to help the prince get up. The weight difference was immediate, more than she thought, and she realized that she hadn't taken into account the weight of their armor and weapons. Nothing for it now. Even 5 minutes of flight time would be better than staying here, With a billowing surge of wind chakra that warped the rain around them, she forced her fan into the skies. The armored samurai yanked off his helmet, revealing that her assumption had been right. The daimyo's grim face peered down over the edge to the rapidly shrinking battle below. He turned, looking to his son. "What happened? Why are you out here?" She couldn't see him, eyes facing forward as they were, but the younger man sounded very much like a scolded child. She could almost hear the physical wince. "Father, I'm sorry. We received a message." Whatever explanation was about to be given was cut short with brutal finality. With a shriek of tearing metal, Temari felt a lance of white-hot agony rip its way across her back. She fell to her knees, barely keeping enough focus to prevent them all from plummeting to their deaths as could to let out a scream, a horrid, pained thing. She turned to look, searching as much for her own injury as well as the damage to the fan. Blood was everywhere. Something had ripped through the tail of her fan, sending shrapnel flying, and either the shorn bits of metal or the projectile they'd used had carved a jagged tear across the prince's neck. He was gasping for breath, hands clutching at blood that flowed between his fingers like water through a net as Magajiro held onto him and kept him from teetering off the edge. Temari tried to look at her own wound, but she couldn't see it, but she could feel it. Somewhere on her lower back, radiating pain everywhere, she felt like she was about to throw up or pass out. Maybe both. Her eyes rolled in their sockets, the fan lurching precariously beneath all of them before she righted herself, forced herself to stay awake. 5 minutes. She could avoid passing out for 5 goddamn minutes. She tried to avoid it. She really did. She'd seen it coming. Seen the danger almost a full second before it came. The chakra shadow of her enemy showing her clearly what was going to happen. It was a combination of the Jinchuriki's speed and poor footing on the too slick mud that got her in the end. She was not Naruto. She was not gifted with an unnaturally fast healing to help with Tsunade's technique as it was. She raised an arm to block, in reflex. It was probably the only reason she was still alive with a broken forearm and dislocated shoulder, as opposed to a ruptured lung and shattered rib cage. Her body went sailing across the battlefield. She heard Naruto shout her name. Her vision swam, but she focused past the pain. Hitting the ground with a roll, she got to her feet, hearing Han's heavy footsteps pounding on the ground, rushing her. She looked up, in time to see an earth wall spring up between herself and the Jinchuriki. He tore through it like a rice paper door, unstoppable, his eyes open wide, pupils dilated into pinpricks, veins bulging along his exposed skull and neck, a berserker frenzy as the chakra shroud flickered around his body, just barely held back. There was another wall, and another. Nothing slowed him. She tried to layer a genjutsu to help, only to feel as though she was trying to toss a fishing net onto the great Summon-manda, sheer rage and fury tearing through her illusion even before his wild, uncontrollable chakra did. Mokuton! The dome of wood sprouted around her like a cocoon, encasing her in walls of twisted bark meters thick. Han's fist crashed into the structure hard enough to shake it. A second punch sent cracks through the inside. She heard the man roar in a mixture of pain and hatred. Direct contact with the Mokuton. Naruto would hurt him greatly even through the briefest contact. Even so, a third blow and she could see him again, a fourth and the rain now leaked in. A fifth would expose her. She could feel Naruto moving below, ready to rip open the earth and pull her to safety a second before something crashed into the Jinchuriki, tearing him away. The wood barrier opened up, thick roots twisting and retracting into the earth, allowing Itachi to see none other than Tsunade grappling with the armored beast. Grabbing him by the head, she smashed the Jinchuriki's skull into the dirt once, twice, a third time before Han's hands rose up, the monstrous shinobi regaining his wits and crashing his limbs down over Tsunade's forearms with a snap of bones. She did not scream, but Itachi caught the grimace of pain even as she forced bones to knit and set, muscles to tighten and inner damage to repair itself before she met the man blow for blow. Their taijutsu exchange was a monstrous thing, armor shattered like glass, shards of metal tearing into both combatants and explosions of shrapnel. Tsunade and Han, for once, had an opponent that could match their absurdly high strength, and they both seemed determined to rip the other apart with said strength. Itachi dared a look across the battlefield. She could only see 2 of the Umbu left. Guy was badly injured, 3 slashes, one across his chest, another along his hip and the third over his left bicep. He was taking the lion's share of the enemy combatants. The flush of his skin told her he had opened several of the gates. The 4th? The 5th? She didn't know. The enemy force that had consisted of nearly 60 was down to just 2 dozen. Still too many. Far too many. They needed to win. Needed to end it now. She turned, looking at Naruto as he rushed to try to get to her. He was breathing harshly, haggard, worn, even his chakra was showing the signs of wear and tear. They would lose this war of attrition. They had to win. Bring the monster down. He slowed, and stopped, looking at her as her message reached through his thoughts. He didn't look happy, but he nodded, trusting her. Then he disappeared from their sights. Instantly, the barricade of elemental energy vanished, earth walls and wind blades and crushing waters all disappearing like dry leaves in a windstorm, and the IWA ninja around them lunged. They ignored Tsunade, ignored Guy and the Umbu. They had just one priority now. Kill her. She took a breath and her red eyes spun within the iris. Han could resist, sheer blind rage and the chakra of a bijou not allowing her enough time to sink her proverbial hooks into his mind. But these men were not Han. And after years and years of hearing nothing but legends and stories, their fear was a palpable thing, even as they pushed through it to try and kill the danger she represented. Rage was a hard thing to pierce, but fear. Fear was something she could use. Fear was something she could feast on. The world in their eyes and hers shifted to red. And suddenly she was there, and not there, she was behind, above, her blades emerged from the ground, the edges of the grass became razor glass, the rain above, shards of ice, they were pierced, run through. Men screamed as insects crawled under their flesh and ate their innards, as their eyes boiled and they drowned in torrents of blood. They tried to dispel it, tried to push through, ignore it, lunging after her. The most skilled sensed her through the illusion itself, following her chakra trail. She did not need to defeat them. Only stall them. Just a few seconds. She just needed to hold out for a few more seconds. He'd never failed her, he wouldn't start now. She looked to Tsunade and Han, watching as the Jinchuriki threw the woman through a boulder, her body tearing through the gray granite with frightening ease, coming to a stop. For the first time in Itachi's memory, Tsunade was struggling to get back up. His head swiveled around, searching for her, searching for Naruto, and Itachi was forced to move, to stop him. Her arm was throbbing, the tips of her fingers were tingling, going numb, she could feel the hot, sticky blood trailing down her flesh with the water, caking itself along the length of her sleeve. Han rushed like a rampaging bull, only for Itachi's foot to crash into his neck, the very tip of her boot digging into his larynx and windpipe from the side, enough force to crush the vital piece of anatomy outright a dozen times over. Han's neck twisted inwards, his whole body lurching, as if absorbing the blow before he rounded on her with eyes that gleamed silver, the chakra shroud exploding around his body in bright white light as he roared like a beast, lashing out to try and grab her. She pulled away, just not quite fast enough, his hand fisting the cloth around her leg before she yanked down and ripped it, the fabric staying in his hand before she backed away, a burst of lightning exploding from her palm just a scant inch from his face. He reeled, screaming, blind. Just a second. Just a few more seconds. Her good hand drew a knife, cutting at him, a slice above the brow line, bleeding, blinding him even more as he tried to blink away the sting. Then someone was on her, the weight of a body crashing into her, an arm around her neck, someone she missed, hadn't caught. The pain was quick and sharp, before it became a cluster of agony radiating through her. A knife. A kunai knife. The bastard twisted. Trying to make sure she'd die. Trying to make sure she'd bleed out. Her breath left her in a rush, the illusion fell away. She heard Naruto scream. That's when they felt it. When they all felt it. The illusion that had shielded him falling away, and each of the men stopped fighting their physical enemy and illusionary ones, turning as a single cohesive unit to the source. His eyes were different now, green-tinged chakra surging through him like a font, red markings on his face, the Rasengan swirling like a storm in his hand. She had enough in her to smile. He looked furious, teeth bared, shaking with rage, but she was glad he had enough of a mind to keep his priorities straight as he rushed towards Han, not her. The wind Rasengan had been seen by Iwa Nin once before, and it was just as frightening now, wailing and crying with the force of the typhoon trapped in his palms. He moved so fast she barely had enough time to send out her last bit of help. A spark. Barely even that. A burst of flame. It caught the wind, the whole monstrous technique erupting in a swirling fireball. Han's chakra shroud surged forth, unhindered now, as though a beast gaining a surge of strength in its final death throes, trying to catch the technique in silver chakra claws. Not enough, not nearly enough. The man behind her let her go, bracing himself, and she had enough in her to draw a blade of her own and driving it into the underside of his jaw, shoving it through his palate and into his brain before her strength gave out and she fell, covering her head as wind, fire, and demonic chakra struggled for dominance. He would win. He was not allowed to lose. When the blast came, it slid her along the dirt, her broken arm trapped underneath her body, twisted painfully, but she didn't have the strength to lift herself anymore. It wasn't the noise, the loud cacophony of sounds that startled her. Instead, it was how silent it was immediately after. As if the whole world had decided to take a breath. Slow down for a second. It would be later that she'd learn the explosion had been so massive the concussive wave had knocked away the raindrops, at least for a short time. The rain had already come back by the time she felt someone touching her, hands smaller than hers pulling her close. Itachi! Itachi! And Chan! That name, that stupid name. He really had to stop. If you didn't get him, she heard herself mumble. I'm gonna kill you! He laughed. It sounded strange to her ears, like a sob. I got him. Don't worry. She nodded, or tried to. Distantly she heard the sound of someone shouting for a retreat, people fleeing. That was a good thing. Don't let me fall asleep, she demanded. That was dangerous, she remembered that. Ba-chan's coming. She's already coming over. Okay? She let herself nod again, struggling to stay awake. There will be questions. She found the strength to mumble. It helped. You can't avoid them anymore, Naruto-kun. Don't worry about that. Just keep talking to me, alright? She wasn't sure when she passed out. To be honest, she wasn't even sure how she'd gotten them down to the ground without killing all of them. When she came to, the world was swaying in front of her, the green forests of Hai no Kuni filtering the light of the sun through the canopy. The haggard, worn face of Magajiro Kuta looked down on her. He was carrying her. Don't try to talk. His voice was rough, choked, eyes bloodshot and red, tear streaks staining his cheeks. You've gotten us far enough. She tried to speak, felt the air in her lungs catch in her throat, ended up coughing instead. The world around her swam, fading in and out of the blackness. How long were they walking? How far were they? She didn't know. Her mind came back to full consciousness at the sound of a voice. The sun was blazing across the sky. Early morning, noon, and evening giving way to sunset. She tried to look, tried to see if she needed to defend herself, but her swimming vision only caught the sight of some fog-hazed silhouette at the edges of her sight before her body finally gave up the fight, and all she knew was dark. They stood at a creek. A thin, pathetic thing, babbling with droplets of water that wound and bent this way and that way through the autumn dry leaves and rocky grounds. The forest trees were tall. Even at the very edges of the borders, Hai no Kuni's forest held sway. I've thought of you since you left. She looked down on the two of them, standing at the crest of a rise, where the creek fell to pass by his feet. She was standing on rock, he on the dried, packed dirt. The rains hadn't come this far, and even the dew of the humid day had long since evaporated. His voice was soft, almost kindly. She remembered that voice whenever she had a nightmare, whenever she'd failed at training. She thought she'd been ready for this confrontation. Now she wasn't so sure. Standing here, seeing him, he looked haggard, worn thin, dirt and blood stained his armor and robes, the lines of his face looked deep and severe, carved there with a knife. They'd all spread out. One last-ditch effort at catching him before he escaped, and all of this was for nothing. It was a miracle she'd found him at all. If not for the kunoichi he was carrying with him, she probably wouldn't have. Her chakra was faint, wounded as she was, but she'd stumbled close enough to sense it. If he'd have left her, he would have gotten away. So they were alone now. A part of her was grateful for that, another part of her dismayed. He stepped to the side, laying down the girl that had secured his death against the base of a tree, before standing to face her fully. I thought that we would meet with friendly smiles over drinks one day, Kuratsuchi. His smile was a bitter thing. This is not what I wanted. And what did you want? She hissed. To use me? Take me off into your castle, make me trust you enough to help you lure my grandfather into a trap? He looked at her, with an expression that was akin to indignation. Do you know how many people whispered in my ear through the years that I should have you killed? He shouted, staring up at her. Every border dispute, every intelligence report, every hint of insurrection, espionage, assassination. Can you fathom how many, Kuratsuchi? If I ever wanted you or your family harm, it would have been easy. By the end, he was shouting. His breath came hard, glaring at her with more anger than she'd ever seen on his once kind face. Peace isn't something any of them want. It's not something they would let happen. Your grandfather had more enemies than me, and I have more enemies than you can dream of. Any one of them dash. How convenient. She hissed, cutting him off, stopping the lies that would be so easy to let herself believe. Suddenly you're in a corner, and you say some other did it. You've been happy to brag about it until now. And why not? He shot back. Who would believe my innocence? Who would believe old hated enemies didn't see an opportunity and took it? Name one person in your village that ever thought for one moment that I'd me. Her eyes stung, and she hated herself for it, hated the pain that crunched down on her ribs and stole the breath from her lungs, hated him most of all because she still could only see him as the closest thing to a grandfather she actually had. Despite that, she should hate him. Despite everything. I considered it. I believed you wouldn't do that. His face softened, and he was once again the person she recognized, if only for a moment. She shook her head, needing to remind herself of what he'd done, everything he'd orchestrated. He was good at this, playing the long game, twisting words, twisting minds. It was why he was so dangerous. You tricked everyone. You tricked me. You deserved to die for it. It was said more to herself than to him, an affirmation seeking conviction. What about Takichio? He bit out, an accusation in his voice. What about him, Kuratsuchi? Did you have to kill him too? She felt something cold settle in her stomach, her friend's smiling face coming to mind in clarity. What are you talking about? Some kind of message. His chest hitched, the breath catching as he spoke. Someone that knew our protocols, our safety measures. Knew how to falsify a message to draw him out. Who could have done that? He shook his head, and looked at her with tears glimmering in his own eyes, looking as betrayed as she felt. Who if not you? Her body tightened, muscles going rigid. She'd seen the dead men, the field of corpses. Had Takichio been there? Was he really dead, or was Kuta just playing for time, trying to throw her off? I don't know what you're talking about, she answered. He looked at her, and she was a little girl again, swearing she hadn't snuck out with Naruto after dark, or that she hadn't stolen his prized horse from the stables. He looked right at her, and he closed his eyes, tears percolating at their corners. When he opened them again, for the first time in her life, he seemed defeated. He laughed. It was a hollow, empty, horrid thing. She never wanted to hear that sound again. Then your grandfather and I are truly birds of a feather. She blinked. That's all it took. Between one instant and the next. A blade was in his chest. It punched through armor, burying itself up to the hilt, and the only reaction either of them gave was Kuta taking a single step back, blinking in dumbfounded stupefaction down at his chest, his fingers brushing over the ring pommel before his legs realized he shouldn't be standing. She was moving before she could think, all but sliding the last foot, scraping her knees on the dirt to get underneath him as he pitched forward, catching the man before he fell and feeling the kernel of pain in her chest blossom like a fungal bloom, spreading through her insides until her quiet tears leaked from her eyes and her fingers tingle with adrenaline-fueled numbness. Her heart hammering beneath her ribs as shocked disbelief froze her thoughts. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. Her head whipped around, searching for the attacker through the trees, but there was no one, nothing she could see. Kuta suddenly sucked down a breath, like a man breaking the surface after nearly drowning. There was blood on his teeth now. He coughed, and she felt the spatter of hot blood against her cheek. She was so close. She felt her head shaking, fingers gripping the knife, wanting to pull it out even as she knew it would kill him, killed by traitors. He gasped out, looking to her, forcing himself to speak. One hand fell away, and she felt the ice in her stomach as she feared it had gone slack before she realized it hadn't. He pulled his sword, sheath and all, and shoved it towards her. The sword of the daimyo, forged by Uchiha Madara's legendary black flames. They will come after you too. She shook her head, trying to push it away, every word stuck in her throat, every thought coming to a screeching halt, incapable of fully forming before something else was taking its place in the noise bouncing around her skull. And then there was no time. Like a crashing wave over a shore, the chakra signature hit her like a full-on train, killing intent so harsh it stole the breath from her. The sound of a snapping tree was her only warning before something smashed into her side, shoving her off the daimyo. She looked up, eyes wide, as she found the Kazekage standing above her, a palpable fury twisting what she could see of his face, eyes glowing yellow. He swung a blade at her, and she pulled away in reflex. Too slow, too close, The slice cut open her eye and cheek, cutting down to the bone. The pain was white-hot agony through her brain, burning away the grief, the confusion. She reached over and grabbed the first thing she could. Blade met blade with a ring of steel, and Kuratsuchi shoved the man off of her. She formed her seals, spitting out a stream of red-hot lava. He didn't move. With a crash of molten liquid, robes went up in flames, skin blackened, and the smell of burning grass and meat filled her nostrils. He never screamed. Perhaps he didn't have time. She wasn't sure if it was a kawarimi, or some other trick. She didn't stay to find out. Launching herself into the trees, she fled as fast as her legs could carry her. It was only later that she realized the weapon she still held in a white-knuckled grip in her hand, the one she'd used to defend herself, was Kutu's sword. Kutu. Magajiro Kutu, the daimyo of Hai no Kuni. He was dead. It took a long time, after the rush of battle. After the pain of her eye and cheek faded. After the exhaustion began to settle into her bones, after she could see the others. After she presented the sword and the battle group began its retreat back to IWA. It took a long time. But when the tears finally came, they would not stop for longer still. Chapter 65. It would become known as the Battle of the Monsoon Plains. The entirety of the continent watched the engagement that should not have taken place, listened to the rumors and reports that should not have existed. They were waiting to see what was true and what was not, measuring the damage caused to and by both sides. The ensuing silence in the months after from these various nations was deafening in its own right. What of the capital? Sarutobi breathed where he lay, focusing almost exclusively on taking long, slow breaths. The room was crowded. Hamura, Koharu, Danzo, Kakashi, Orochimaru, Tsunade, and of course, the arguably two most important members of the village awaiting his attention. Danzo was the one who answered him, sitting to his right. The news will spread soon, the Warhawk stated, and Sarutobi knew his old rival was being truthful. Whatever else he might be, Danzo was loyal to Kanehigakure. The political instability that would soon sweep the seat of the court wouldn't bode well for any of them. As of now, there are two major contenders my information would deem as the most likely candidates to rise to the seat of Prime Minister until the princess comes of age. Only one of them seems the sort that would let her reach said age rather than smothering her in the crib. Sarutobi saw Naruto shift, uncomfortably. The boy sucked down a sharp breath, and perhaps he was the one that gave him the extra strength he needed to give the order. Give that one our backing then. Danzo's single eye shifted to him. We have typically taken no sides in these disputes, Hiruzen. It allows us to avoid collateral damage should we back the losing side. We are at war. Swift resolution to the political situation, not the village's private stability, is what must be ensured now. The longer the seat goes unheld, the more we bleed resources and the more vulnerable we are to external threats from the other daimyo. A pause. I do not like it. But you make a compelling point. With a scrape of the chair's legs against the floor, his rival stood. I will see it is dealt with. I would speak with you again later, Hiruzen. It was as close to well wishes as Danzo had ever come. Sarutobi could recognize it for that even if no one else could. The man negotiated his way through the room, passing by the others as he made his way to the door. He did not look back before he reached the exit, and only spared the merest flicker of a glance to close it shut behind him. He looked to Orochimaru. Tell me what your spies are reporting beyond our borders. The Sannin shrugged. Exaggerations are already flowing like water from fountains. Rumor and conjecture mostly, though they can confirm bingo books are hastily being updated in all 5 nations, even Sunigakure. IWA, as you can imagine, is suffering an internal chaos to rival our own. Whilst they struck down several high-profile targets, losing 2 Kage in as many months has hit their morale and internal political stability hard. I can't confirm if their Jinchuriki died or was severely injured, but either way, they are in no position to take advantage of the chaos any more than we are. They need to settle affairs within their own house first. The warning went unsaid, but he heard it anyway. Kumo and Kiri had no such problems if they decided it suited them. They would have to be vigilant. Have your spies informed you of the likely candidates for the position of Godamed Tsuchikage? Hamura asked, turning to the Sannin. Sarutobi allowed himself an imperceptible nod. No. There are too many right now. Or, that is to say, no shinobi that would indisputably qualify. As you can imagine, this time, they want the title to stick. To lose 3 Kage quickly would absolutely shatter their image. The Kazekage, the prince, and Kuta's death at the IWA girl's hands Naruto's face twisted behind the man, features pained as he visibly stopped himself from speaking. Orochimaru continued, oblivious or choosing to be, can only buoy them so much. Now that we're on the subject, should we begin the screening process? Koharu was the one that spoke next. There are several candidates, beyond the immediate company if you would dash. The god of shinobi shook his head, feeling an itch at the back of his throat as though he wanted to cough. He resisted the urge. I'm not going to die quite yet. It can wait a while longer. Always so stubborn. She sighed. He smirked. Too stubborn to die, you mean? It was an old joke between the two of them. She smiled, but it was a thing of brittle glass. She sighed. Very well. I will not trouble you with it, but I will get the lists vetted and ready for whenever you choose to deal with it. She stood. Hamura stood with her as Hiruzen expected. Birds of a feather they'd always been, more so after he rose to his position. They both bowed, Hamura offering a gentle grip to his shoulder before they left. And here he was, with the three most likely to succeed him. He was not going to die. Not yet. Not for a while anyway. But his fighting days were over. The young Kage had forced his hand, nearly caught him in the deadly trap he'd so carefully planted. He'd escaped immediate death, but it had cost him. His chakra pathways had been overtaxed. The burst of required energy to remove the weighted dirt that had trapped him had been the equivalent of a bomb going off through his aged chakra pathways. The burst of speed he'd used to escape the flames had ripped muscles and nearly torn tendons. He may have recovered, given time, if he'd stayed still. But he hadn't. He'd forced his body to keep moving, forced his chakra to mold, and heal him enough to finish the job and eliminate the boy before he escaped. The burn injury they did not have the needed medication to treat on hand, especially with Tsunade, miles away, had all but exacerbated the issue. No. He would not fight again. In all honesty, he was lucky he hadn't died of infection or pneumonia. It let them save face. No one needed to know, nor would they know that he'd barely survived. Time caught up with all warriors. To the world at large, Sarutobi Hiruzen would die Kanahigakure's indestructible Sandaime Hokage months or, perhaps if he were lucky, a handful of years from now within the village walls, in his sleep perhaps, or in the middle of one of his paintings. Image would carry them far now. Strength, indomitability, they would have to suffice as their foundations crumbled and reforged themselves in the months to come while the daimyo's seat was settled. One last gift from himself to the village. Which one would take it from him, he wondered? There was little doubt Danzo would favor Orochimaru. Perhaps he would convince Hamura and Koharu as well to endorse him. Though he was sure his old teammates would much prefer Hatake Kakashi, either of them wanted Tsunade. Too many morals, too smart by half and too difficult to control in all respects. Possibly why he thought she was the better fit. He sucked down a breath, ragged and breaking as he tried not to cough. Opening one eye, he swiveled it around to look at Orochimaru. The body? He asked. He didn't need to specify. His student shrugged. I made certain the identifiable parts would remain so for the Suna medics. They will confirm the Kazekage's death to the IWA girl's fire. Chio is one of the best toxicologists in the known world. Tsunade hedged. You're certain that they won't detect my poison? The pale ninja reassured, and Sarutobi heard rather than saw Naruto shift uncomfortably where he stood. IWA will be blamed, our alliance is secure. A good thing, considering the position we now find ourselves in. If I may ask. Kakashi spoke up, voice barely above a whisper but cutting through the room by his uncharacteristic breaking of silence. Why didn't you chase down the IWA girl? I almost did, the man admitted. Then I realized I needed someone to carry the message of the Kazekage's death. Someone who wanted to take credit. If I show up after the Kazekage's odd decisions saying he died, soon a ninja might have a grossly overinflated opinion of themselves, but last I checked they can put two and two together if presented with the right number of fingers to help Hatake. Should we really be listening to this? Naruto finally spoke up, bringing all eyes towards himself. I mean, either of us He hesitated, looking to the placid profile of Itachi. We're really not involved in you are now. Hiruzen cut him off, not even bothering to turn his head where he rested to look at the boy. Your mere existence now places you at the forefront of these decisions. You, both of you, are far too important to remain out of nearly any loop, though even before that you seemed to find a way to shoulder yourself into them regardless. The boy fidgeted again. There was a silence between them all, but Hiruzen could feel the tension in the room. Tsunade's silence, Orochimaru's anticipation, and even Hatake Kakashi's expectant gaze. They all wanted answers. He opened his eyes, even the fibers of his eyelids hurt, little scratches of aching pain as he swiveled his gaze to look at the boy. Come here. Both of you. They stepped forward. Itachi, more sure of herself than Naruto, who seemed to be actively avoiding looking at him, staring at everything else, the floors, the walls, the sheets of the bed, anything else. The sound was like gravel in his throat, and he reached a hand, placing it on the boy's shoulder. He would ask. Once. Tell me the truth, he said. No more lies. No more hiding from me. Finally, Naruto met his gaze, and he saw something there, a steel in the boy's spine, pain as well. He recognized those eyes. What makes you so sure we've been lying? The Chunin hedged. Because I've allowed it, Hiruzen bluntly answered, keeping his gaze locked, refusing to look away. Refusing to allow him to look away. I'm not sure when I came to the discovery. Perhaps it was a gradual thing. Perhaps it's because I've known you both all your lives. But I've allowed it because I knew you were both loyal to the village. That you were both good, valuable shinobi. I did not know everything. I could live with that. But this goes beyond you now. Beyond both of you. What you displayed, it will send ripples through the world. Tell us the truth. How did you unlock it? And why did you not trust us with the knowledge when you did? Emotions flitted across the boy's face, a rictus of conflict. Then, he saw the boy's eyes harden, ready to fight, to keep lying. Keep his deception. Then her hand was on his shoulder. Itachi's fingers pressed gently and the fight was leached out of the boy. He looked up towards her and found her patient gaze staring back at him. She didn't say anything. The two seemed to have a conversation through eye contact alone, which, now that he considered it, could have very well been entirely literal with the Uchiha princess' particular skills. When the words came, they were almost mumbled, so low one could barely hear them, even in the sepulchral silence of the room. They were never false memories. Tsunade and Orochimaru looked at each other, confusion passing over them. Hatake stayed perfectly still, no expression visible behind his Anbu mask. Sarutobi listened as Naruto faced him. You all thought my memories were false. Implanted by some ninja to cover his tracks after he snuck into the village and stole Kurama from the seal. Kurama? Tsunade asked. The Kyuubi. His student shifted, Orochimaru went still. They were never false memories. He repeated, looking down. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. Genin number 005738. Third member of Team 7 Cell under Jounin Hatake Kakashi. Last survivor of the hidden village of Kanahagakure no Sato. I'm 24 years old. Tsunade's voice strained, struggling to be patient. He could tell by Orochimaru's face that he was struggling to do the same. Naruto. This is serious. This isn't the time for a store dash. I know and can perform 123 jutsu from the Forbidden Scroll despite never having looked at a single page in this life. He exclaimed, shutting his eyes as though he was trying to shut out the sound of her voice. I know the names and abilities of every Jinchuriki of the nations despite having never met more than 2 of them face to face. I can tell you all of their abilities despite having never seen them. I can perform seals decades ahead of any study done to date. The reason I have the Mokutan dash. He lifted a foot, placing it on the bed before pulling up the leg, revealing a tiny seal on his ankle. Is because I did this to myself when I was 4 years old, biologically. Sarutobi peered at the thing. Orochimaru tilted his head to do the same. He was no seal expert, but judging by how his student's eyes widened considerably, however, this was no splotch of ink done in a fancy pattern. You should be dash, a stone statue? Naruto shrugged. Yeah. Probably if I was anyone else. He brought his foot down, covering it up again, shifting from foot to foot in nervous tension. I came back. Everyone was dead. The villages were all destroyed. Everything was gone. I came back. Trying to stop it. Orochimaru and Tsunade quietly stood, waiting for him to decide on the course to take. Sarutobi looked to Itachi, finding the Uchiha staring at him with black, onyx eyes utterly calm. You believe this? It wasn't a question. It wasn't mocking or incredulous. Merely a statement. I do. Her answer was firm, immediate, with no hesitation. Listen to all of it. Put together everything you know. Everything you've seen. Don't let your imagined impossibility cloud it, and you'll see the truth of it, as I did, What is being described is, however, impossible. Hiruzen shifted, sitting a little straighter. While there have been certain techniques and abilities that dabble in time manipulation, they are paltry things, more illusion than a destruction of the laws of physics and nature. My father was Namikaze Minato, and my mother was Uzumaki Kushina. There were many things he had said already. Nearly all could be explained away, or chalked up to exaggeration, delusion, or fabrication. That was not one of them. They all shifted in surprise. They knew, all of them knew, but he couldn't have known. It was one of the more dangerous and tightly guarded secrets in the village, known only, for certain, to the people in this room. And none had told him. Naruto looked at him, pleading with eyes alone to believe him. I'll give you the seal that I used, Gigi. Naruto mumbled. Full copy of it if you want. You just hand it over? He raised an eyebrow. Naruto shrugged. It took 3 of the most powerful ninja in the world, one who had years and years worth of chakra that she gave to us stored up like Tsunade's seal, and Kurama sacrificing himself and his near-endless supply of chakra to just bring me back. You could probably sacrifice every single person in this village and barely make it back 3 days, if even that. Take every person from every village and maybe you can breach a month. The seal alone takes nearly a year to construct at full scale. There was a silence so profound one could almost hear a pin drop. Finally, it was Orochimaru who broke it. You honestly believe this? You're sincerely saying you accomplished real-time travel? His voice held something, the tinge of a scientist discovering a fascinating new field of study. Naruto glared at the man, something dark passing over his features squarely directed at him. Something so vile and hate-filled it almost felt like a physical blow as it knocked the breath from his lungs. The boy had always been suspicious of Orochimaru, but for the first time, Hiruzen genuinely had the impression that, if he could have, Naruto would have stuck a knife through his throat right then and there. Try it, he snarled. Just give me a goddamn excuse. He almost didn't sense it, so insidious as it was, but it was there, a poison at the tip of a needle. Killing intent. Not some bauble of anger. Not some passing rage. True, genuine loathing. Naruto wanted Orochimaru to die. Even his student, who had long since learned to laugh and poke at Naruto's paranoia regarding him, looked genuinely taken aback by the intensity of it, and Tsunade looked downright ill at the sight. Even Kakashi seemed to tense at his bedside, as though Naruto was a wild beast straining at a far too thin and flimsy chain. There was a story here, and Sarutobi knew they were in for a very long conversation. Be it all a fabrication of insanity and delusion or genuine truth. He would not settle for anything less than answers this night. Let us pretend that I believe you, he ventured. Why hide this? And why tell us now? Itachi told me to. He shrugged, being completely honest. I hid it because chances are you wouldn't believe me, and even if you did, there's very little you might be able to do to help. Too much was different right from the beginning. Sensei dash. Tsunade hesitated, and he could see on Naruto's expression how the doubt in her voice cut him like a knife. He held up his hand, silencing further protest. Start from the beginning then. Paint me a picture. Walk me through everything, step by step, and let us see if Itachi-san's faith in you is well placed. So he did. The tale was long, and it was not pleasant. The boy revealed things, secrets, and locked away demons of each of their pasts that he had no business knowing. Tsunade's long-dead brother, the necklace around Dan's neck, the story of Hatake Kakashi's dead teammates, Obito and Rin. Soon enough, the hours bled into one another. The moon moving across the night sky until it was brushing the tree line of the horizon, and still they spoke, still the story continued. He was tired, exhausted, his bones ached, his muscles felt like wet cardboard, and his mind felt like it was lit aflame, but still he listened with rapt, silent attention. By the end, his students, Orochimaru most of all, looked shaken. One would not know it if they did not know him, but he did. His student had gone completely still, his yellow eyes staring at a place on the distant wall, fingers twitching with his arms crossed, his body trembled and a muscle along his neck jerked. Tsunade had taken a seat long ago, her face was cradled in her hand, the other seemingly holding her upright. Only Kakashi looked completely unchanged, hiding behind a mask and heavy cloak. There was silence in the room. I believe, he breathed slowly, that we all need time. He did not miss the irony of those words. To digest this. It was true, even he found himself reeling at it all, if it were indeed genuine, and his rational mind was telling him that somehow, impossibly, it very well could be. "Let us all leave and meet again tomorrow." He wanted to say morning, but that was a scant few hours away, and he doubted any of them would get any sleep right now. Night. Orochimaru could not have left any faster, barely waiting for the word to be out of Sarutobi's mouth before he was slamming the door shut behind him. "Oro dash!" Tsunade shouted at his back, moving to stand, only for Kakashi to stand in her way, shaking his head quietly. The medic bit her lip, and she looked as close to tears as Sarutobi could remember, one hand rising to comb through her hair. Sarutobi could not comfort either of them, not right now. He leaned back into his pillows, closing his eyes. "You are all dismissed." It was a demand, not a statement. Tsunade was the first to leave. She did not spare anyone another glance. Itachi and Naruto followed shortly after, closing the door behind them as Kakashi himself faded into the darker shadows of the room. The door shut behind him, and Naruto felt as though the weight of the world was crashing down over his shoulders, Tsunade and Sarutobi's faces dancing across his mind's eye, the pain, the disbelief, a million other emotions as he recounted to them their deaths and the deaths of everyone they loved, everything they'd built. All because he'd been too weak to stop any of it. He felt Itachi step behind him, and was surprised to feel her arms coil around him, pulling him closer, his back pressed to her stomach as she leaned over him. "The funerals are in a few hours," he muttered, almost remembering right then and there about them. He felt her nod, her hands squeezing. Most people would have told him it wasn't his fault. Sakura would have. Sakura had, many times, before the end. Itachi didn't though. She didn't say anything, and he was grateful for that, over anything else. Didn't need to hear it. Didn't want to. It was his fault. He came back to help, he had changed things. Maybe by just coming back, or through the course of his altered life, he had changed them. Niji shouldn't have died. Kiba and Shino shouldn't have died. Kurenai shouldn't have died. Each one of them felt like a weight. One more failure to the list. His mind flashed to the fight, to seeing the IWA Chunin sneaking up behind her, shoving a knife into her back, and felt his breath catch with a phantom horror. His hand rose, found her arm, and squeezed so tight he was afraid he was hurting her but couldn't stop squeezing. "You can't die," he pleaded. "Not like everyone else. You can't ever die." She said nothing. She just remained there, ever present and ever silent. The rain was heavy along the road. The man in his wagon trudged through the cold and the muck, the horse's hooves plip-plopping or squelching along the mud. He squinted through the rain. Someone there, wide-brim hat, heavy cloak. The traveler grasped at his sword, hoping he would not find trouble ahead. When he drew closer, he noticed the stranger and he himself were marching in the same direction, and the stranger was whistling a happy tune. As the noise of the wagon and horse cut through the hiss of the rain, the man paused, stepping to the side, letting him pass. The man looked at the stranger. His instincts told him to keep going, but his better nature won out. "Would you like a ride till our roads split?" The stranger answered in a voice that was far too happy for this weather. "Oh, thank you so very much." Without wasting another moment, the stranger climbed into the wagon, taking a seat beside him. "Why were you so happy?" the man asked. "You ever know those days where you just feel you've been so productive? You know? Good days," the man answered, nodding before whipping the reins of his horse. "What's with the mask, though? It's a very pretty mask." The wagoner decided to drop the subject, allowing them to continue on in a somewhat comfortable silence. Chapter 66. Bonus scenes. It wasn't your fault. That's what they told her. What they all kept telling her. Sasuke, Sakura, a teary-eyed Tenten, Lee. All of them told her one way or another that it wasn't her fault. That she'd done the best she could, it wasn't her fault. She tried to keep repeating it, rolling the words around in her skull. Tried to convince herself. Sometimes she succeeded. Then she remembered it had been her plan, her idea to put them in front. Her orders that put them in danger. Who the hell was she to order them to do that? She should have stepped up first. She should have been on the front. She was tougher than Kiba in taijutsu, probably tougher than Niji if she really pushed herself. Why the hell hadn't she positioned herself in the front? Why had she hidden behind them, directing the others? Niji could have done it, or Shino. Why hadn't she told Lee to open the gates from the start? She knew the odds. What the hell made her think she had the luxury of keeping a trump card? It was her fault. The others were nice to try and say otherwise, but it was all her fault. Kiba, Niji, Shino, hell, maybe if she'd trained a little harder she'd have been allowed to go with Kurenai-sensei and help there at least. Maybe she could have saved at least one person. The funerals were blurs in her memory. Tears and crying from so many people. Tenten had cried, Lee had looked with a quiet, grim sort of gaze, staring at the coffin as it was laid down in the Hyuga graveyard. Kiba's mother and sister had cried, the Inuzuka dogs had howled all through the night. She couldn't attend Shino's funeral, the Aburaim were notoriously private about their internment rituals. Kurenai-sensei, it wasn't your fault. They tried to say. Her father had tried to comfort her, inept at it as he was. In the end, he'd simply left her to her space, to silence. Not reminding her of clan duties, not asking if or when she would find another team. Just leaving her be. She supposed it was the best he could do, others sought her out. Her sister Hanabi, Sakura, Tenten, Lee at least twice. Sasuke surprisingly came by frequently. How are you doing? That was their question. She tried to be polite, tried to tell them she was okay. Inside, all she wanted to answer was, how the fuck do you think? Stop asking that fucking question. She hated the question. Hated the looks in their eyes. Hated the way her eyes burned and her throat closed up whenever she looked at these people that just kept fucking reminding her. She wanted to scream, to rage and shout and hear her own voice like she used to when she was a kid, and she couldn't even do that. One day, she walked out of the compound, and she didn't intend on coming back. Her feet dragged her through the village, every street and store bringing memories to her that just twisted her insides. She wasn't sure where she was going, or how far. She just had to get out of here. Be alone. Far away from people. Then, she found herself standing here, fitting, really. The names were carved onto the plaque. The structure was 12 feet tall and 3 times as broad, each edition carved in the most delicate of kanji, the lines and figures drawn with precision to make each name, no matter how long or short, occupy the same relative space. Row upon row dotted the monument, hundreds, thousands. Soon their names would be added here. Would hers? She doubted it. The knife was in her hand. When had she drawn it? She brought her eyes down to the cold, dark metal, fingers trembling as her eyes burned. She drew a finger across the blade. It cut clean. Sharp. She stared at the edge of gleaming metal, her insides feeling hollow and cold, her throat tingled, like the feeling one gets before throwing up. Her knees felt weak. She pressed one hand to the cold dark granite as she allowed herself to kneel in front of it, fingers clenching into a fist against the stone as her tears threatened to come up all over again. Her hand tightened its grip on the handle. Then there was another hand over her own, lightly pressing the weapon away. She looked up, dark clouds roiled in the sky, and Hinata found herself staring into the snarling visage of a wolf mask. The man knelt at her side. She felt the beginnings of rain drizzling down from above. His free hand came forward under hers, coaxing her to let go of the weapon. Her lips thinned, her whole body trembled. She wanted to be angry. She couldn't. If it had been the others, Lee, Tenten, Sakura, or even Sasuke, she could have. It would be so easy. All she'd have to do is look at the pity in their eyes. That fucking look that said they felt sorry for her, not for her team. But he didn't. She couldn't see his face, she couldn't see his eyes. But she could see it, something no one else could show. Something she never thought she'd see. Understanding. They sat there, she wasn't sure how long. Her fingers were still holding the blade with a white-knuckled grip. He didn't say a single word. He just waited, with all the patience in the world. Finally, she let go, jerking her hand open lest she change her mind. He caught it, holding it in his hand, showing it to her clearly before reaching closer to the kunai pouch on her thigh and sliding it into the topmost pocket. The first weapon to be drawn when she reached. He stood up, she followed him with her eyes. He offered his hand. All she had to do was reach out and accept. Murderer. That's what he was. In every life, that's what he would always be. His father had died before his birth, taking a mission too high risk for his rank, trying to feed them. His mother, dead, bringing him to the world. Cursed child, they whispered. Freak was another. Fear and disgust plain as day on their faces as they beheld his face, ushering their children away. He'd hated them. Hated all of them so fiercely. He would prove them all wrong. He would become the greatest shinobi that ever lived. He swore that to himself. It wasn't until his team, until Hiruzen, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and he tried to murder them. He did murder one of them. He wanted to call it a lie. He wanted to rage and curse at the boy that looked at him with judgment. But he couldn't. How close had he teetered at the edge of the abyss? How many times had he considered it and backed away before the plunge? Murderer. They were wrong. Monster was more fitting. Now here he stood in one of his many safe houses, staring at documents, experiments, and procedures. Ideas and half-made creations. How easy it would be to complete them. To make something monstrous with them. Do step past the line. Not simply skirt around it. He couldn't call the boy a liar. Truth was staring him dead in the face. The door opened. You shouldn't be here, Haim. He didn't look back. Didn't need to. Only 2 people could have ever entered without triggering his security, and one of them was bedridden. Haven't you heard? It'd be easy for me to kill you. A pause. Hesitation. He could almost see her gnawing on her lower lip, clenching her fists tight. Trying to decide what to say. Don't say that, is what she finally settled on. But it's true. He shot back, straightening where he leaned on the workbench. Isn't it? No, it's not. He rounded on her, turning so fast his hair whipped wildly around the crown of his head, the whole room blurring at the speed that he moved. He saw her suck in a breath, surprised, hands rising in a reflexive defense before he was grabbing her by the biceps, bodily lifting her off her feet and slamming her back into a wall. She stared down from where he held her, eyes wide, and he knew his eyes gleamed in the dim light, yellow and murderous. Now, you don't really believe that, do you, Haim? You've heard it yourself, testimony of the what-if. Don't tell me you never considered it, don't pretend it never tickled the back of your mind. Now we know. That's not you. Her voice was faint, almost a whisper. Begging, pleading with him to say she was right. Isn't it? He repeated, forcing a smile to spread. Do you know how many times I've been tempted? Do you know how often I've told myself Sensei is a fool? How many times I've contemplated how much easier things would be without his rules and his oversight? Can you even fathom it? You've thought about it. You've never done it though. You've never betrayed the village, you've never betrayed Sensei, and you've never betrayed me. He snarled, hating the chocolate brown eyes that looked at him with something that should not be, something he didn't deserve. He drew a knife before he realized what he was doing, pressing it to her throat, and he felt her pulse quicken along her arm. Don't think it hasn't crossed my mind? Don't think I'm some saint. I've thought of it. I've thought of all of it. When Jiraiya died, when Minato was nominated, when the Kyuubi nearly destroyed us and the village looked to be on the brink of total collapse. When I married Dan? The words hit him like a punch to the throat. He fell completely silent, releasing her like she was a red-hot iron brand, burning his flesh. He stepped back, away from her. Slowly, she pushed herself off the wall, looking at him with those soft eyes, tears glimmering within them. I know, she whispered. I know a lot more than you're probably comfortable with. I know. And I still say you're a good man. Maybe the other you was weak. Maybe the other you got hit in the head too many times, but you're not him. He grit his teeth, feeling the shout building up in his stomach. You turned it down. She beat him to it. Her own voice swallowing the room, bouncing off the walls. I know they approached you. She looked like she was fighting tears, swallowing the lump in her throat. Danzo, Hamura, Koharu. I know they came to you. They laid it all out, flat on the table, and said the job was yours. What did you answer? Now he swallowed, looking away. Sensei will decide. She stepped closer, and he had to fight the absurd, almost gut-wrenching urge to step away, standing ramrod stiff instead. I don't care what some other you did. I don't care about what could have happened, what you thought about doing. He felt her wrap her arms around him, head pressing into his chest as her fingers pressed firmly into his back, drawing him close. He couldn't breathe. You are my teammate. There's almost no one I trust more. You're a good man. And if Naruto can't see that, then he's a fucking idiot. He isn't wrong, Haim. Then you're a fucking idiot too. He heard her sob. And like all the other times when she cried, he acted. His arms coiled around her, finally returning them embrace. He would be surprised to find that even monsters can cry. Chapter 67. Bonus Scene 3. It wouldn't be long now. Days at most. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure, was dying. He hadn't expected this. Not his death, of course, that was well established in advance. He just never expected to die in his own bed without a knife to his throat. After so many years, nay decades, of constant war, he should have met his end long ago on a battlefield. If for no other reason than sheer statistical probability. But he'd beaten the odds in a way. It was more than most could hope for. But to leave the village like this, in this moment of political upheaval and the throes of unrest. The thought gnawed at him, stealing away any peace he might have found in these last moments. The Uchiha clan was in an uproar. Fugaku's publicly estranged relationship with his daughter was coming to a head. The man was simultaneously trying to establish contact with the girl, make contingency plans to force her back into the fold of the clan by force if need be, and trying to maintain a firm grip on the clan. The latter was complicated by parts of the clan wishing for his removal as head, if for no other reason than the belief that it might appease Itachi enough to speak with them. The fact that they got to punish the man for letting the most powerful and important member of their family slip right between his fingers while also climbing the ladder of inter-clan politics was just a bonus. Naruto adding his own, not inconsiderable voice, and he meant that both literally and figuratively, to the arguments/threats being thrown around if anyone from the clan so much as looked Itachi's way was not helping matters in the least. The Mokuton was quite a shield, but it would not subdue the resentment and anger that the boy was rapidly building up within the Uchiha as a whole. To add to that quickly boiling pot of inner turmoil, the race for taking the seat of Hokage was now underway. Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Kakashi were the favorites, of course, but there were always contenders, rivals, powerful shinobi, people of ambition. Even the smoothest of transitions were fraught with months of political infighting, cajoling, and all sorts of backroom deals before the matter was officially settled. And lastly, to top it all off, the daimyo's seat. Already word had reached him that 3 nobles had been killed. 2 of the lords were gathering their own small private forces while others were shoring up their political positions. A nest of crows and vultures, and the princess was under the protection of her cousin Kotaro. How genuine that protection was, he could not say. Simply because Danzo pegged him as the most likely to genuinely defend her didn't mean things couldn't change. Power is tempting after all. And when a toddler was the only thing standing between you and the throne, Sarutobi found one could rationalize many monstrous acts. And that was only the internal strife. IWA was in the process of selecting a new Kage. Kumo had withdrawn all of its shinobi from active duty and was beginning to gather their full force, their target still unknown. Kiri was the only one of the 3 non-allied powers that could be counted on to consider a non-aggression pact. If only to secure the trade agreement they so desperately wished for. Amigekyo was openly providing aid to IWA, with Kusa now taking an interest in the conflict as well, approaching all sides to see who would come at them with the better offer. Takigekyo were raiding Suna and IWA supplies, sensing an opportunity with the Kazakage and Tsuchikage now dead. He was dying in his bed, right when it seemed his village would need him the most. There is still so much to do, a part of him said, frustrated beyond words. It is for others. The voice of his sensei, Hashirama, responded in his thoughts, calm and patient as always. Find what peace you can with what you've accomplished. Don't disturb yourself with what you couldn't. He heard Tobirama next, pragmatic to the last. They were right, of course. They were always right. But there was still one more thing he could do. One more thing he could, if not resolve, at least help. It might cause more grief, more pain, but he had to try. Dad? Asuma's voice urged him to crack his eyes open, finding his son standing in the doorway. Their relationship had never been close, the curse of leadership. But even so, when he asked, Asuma answered, dropping everything, even his own grief over Yuhi Kurenai, to tend to him in these last few days. A better son than he deserved. Uzumaki's here for ya. Hiruzen found the strength to nod. Thank you, Asuma. An inadequate response, but even now he couldn't say everything he wished. Coward. Send him in. Asuma bowed slightly, stepping aside. And there he was. The Jounin vest was new, stiff and large on him to let him grow into it for now. After the Battle of Monsoon Fields, a formal Jounin examination would have been academic at best. Gigi. His voice was a breathy whisper, almost in disbelief, seeing him here. Like this, Sarutobi found the strength to smile. He gestured for Naruto to sit. There were no chairs available, only enough room at his side, a similar place Sarutobi himself had sat on those rare occasions when Naruto was sick and in the hospital during his youth. A manipulation, a cruel one in hindsight. Perhaps he'd been a shinobi for too long. The boy, because that's what he always would be in Hiruzen's eyes, stepped forward, his eyes downcast. The Storm King. Naruto raised his head, blinked. What? That is what my spies report that they're calling you. He felt a smile tug at his lip. Uzumaki Naruto. The Storm King of Konohagakure. Heh. He laughed, though there was little genuine mirth in it. Guess wind, water, and earth feels like a storm when used all at once. Maybe I'll learn some lightning to really make the name stick. He smiled. It was good to see that smile. He settled on the bed, the mattress creaking and shifting with his weight. How? The boy trailed off, looking down. How much time? Not long. He answered the unspoken query. Another day. Perhaps two. My tenketsu are failing, soon chakra will not reach my organs. The blonde's hands tightened to fists, gripping the fabric of his pants. Sarutobi breathed through his nostrils, slow and deep as he let the silence fall over them for a short time. You cannot be angry forever, Naruto-kun. And there it was, like a knife suddenly thrown between the two. The tension in Naruto's fist spread to his shoulders, the tendon in his neck visible through the skin. Don't I have the right to be angry, Gigi? His voice was tight, pained, feeling another knife twisting a raw wound that Sarutobi could see had never really healed. Had never been allowed to heal. You're a good boy, Naruto-kun. He somehow found a way to put strength back in his voice. He would have never lacked conviction. But strength, that was harder now. I know you've already forgiven Kuratsuchi for her murder of Magajiro-sama. Even now you want to protest on her behalf. When I say that, don't you? A muscle in the boy's jaw twitched, refusing to meet Sarutobi's eyes. This is different. Why? He urged. He betrayed the village. He is standing within its walls. Protecting it. He killed you. I'm dying because of my battle with the Tsuchikage. Not him. He brainwashed my teammate, turned him against us. Tsunade is training Sasuke dash. Naruto whirled on him, a feral snarl on his face, a fathomless rage burning behind his gaze, turning his visage into something monstrous. Even the tears that glimmered at the corners of his eyes did nothing to soften the image as the boy stood over him, hands brandished like claws, teeth bared. It made Hiruzen's heart ache to see it. He took everything from me. His voice seemed to make the very walls shake with its volume. He had little doubt everyone in the house heard it. Naruto didn't seem to notice. If he did, he likely wouldn't have cared. Hiruzen breathed, remaining quiet, sensing a dam had just broken within the boy and that all of this was ready to come tumbling out. He killed you, trained that bastard Kabuto. Helped create the seals Tobi used. He designed the Edo fucking Tensei. Without him, nothing would have gone wrong. All of my friends, my family, they would all be alive. Everything that happened, he laid the foundations for it. It was built off of his fucking greed. What Kabuto used. What Tobi used. All of it. He hasn't done that. Don't lie to me. Naruto pleaded. Don't pretend you haven't looked. Don't pretend you don't see that he's just a step or two away from doing it again. He was right, unfortunately. Orochimaru's private labs and safehouses had many things stored within them. Documents, ideas, contingency plans, experiments. The worst ones, the ones Naruto told him of, were never past the concept stage, but they were there. Even so, his student had never acted on those thoughts. Never crossed that line. He was not this monster Naruto remembered. Not now. Hopefully not ever. The boy panted, his breath hard as his whole body seemed to heave, his shoulders slumping after a moment as his clenched fist shook at his side. Don't I have the right to be angry, Gigi? The silence between them was deafening. Hiruzen looked at him, this young man that had gone through so much, done so much. For all of his experience, for all of his years, Hiruzen still had more. He could read him in this moment. The lines of his face. The scars of his heart. Hiruzen shook his head. You wish to hold on to this hate, not because of what he did, but because for so long, it has been the one thing driving you forward, my boy. That's dash, you're afraid that, like so many other things that have changed, what if your masked man is gone too? And there, he cut to the heart of it. Naruto looked like Hiruzen had just punched him in the gut. It was all the answer the old Kage needed. You've thought of it, he continued. Considered the possibility. All these years that you've been keeping an ear to the ground, that you've been searching and you found nothing, heard nothing. His influence in Kiri, his acts in Kumo, non-existent. That's why you hold on to it so fiercely, Why you directed at him? Someone must be punished. And if you can't find the guilty party, if he is truly beyond your reach by chance, or fate, then why not the proverbial runner-up? That is the truth. The blonde didn't say a word, blue eyes stared into compassionate hazel. I can't make you give up your anger, this hate you've been keeping tight in your chest. Only you can do that. But I know beyond a shadow of any doubt that you're strong enough to endure its absence, not weak enough to require its presence, my boy. Chapter 68. The door opened with a creak of hinges, bringing all eyes towards the new arrival. Kakashi smiled somewhat nervously. Sorry. The heater broke down at my house, so I had to stay for a bit to keep my snake warm. You don't have a snake? Orochimaru sneered. Kakashi tried not to let his nervousness show. Elsewhere, a purple-haired kunoichi sneezed. Mama. He waved the snake Sannin away as he stepped into the room, taking note of all the faces gathered together. Were you all waiting on little old me? Please, take this seriously, Hokage-sama. Danzo's voice rumbled where he sat, his cane pounding on the hardwood floors for emphasis. I always do. He swore, his eyes crinkling into a smile as he marched across the room and took his seat at the head of the table. Since I'm late, let's dispense with the pleasantries and cut right to it. Yes? Orochimaru was the one to begin, hands clasped behind his back as he stated his grim news with a calm, cold apathy. Diplomatically, it is cemented. Barring the unexpected or the miraculous, Iwagakure has gathered more allies than we have. The Godame Hokage took a breath. This was starting out so well. How? Fear-mongering mostly. The snake Sannin shrugged. Suna has remained our ally to avenge their Kazekage, his death still stings, and Kiri's desire for a trade deal, helped by Naruto's friendship with a kunoichi holding the ear of the Mizukage, gave us their support as a distant ally. A good thing, by every measure. Naruto's ability to make friends with foreign shinobi, risky as it might be, was paying off in at least this regard in the short term. But they are just that dash. Orochimaru continued. Distant. IWA has reached out to Taki, Kusa, Tori in conjunction with the AIM faction they were already allied with. Propagandists and paranoia did the rest. The Mokutan and Mangekyo have given us much clout, and a surge in our income from the clients that have flooded the village for the last 4 years since, but it has been a double-edged sword. The minor villages fear we will seek to expand and have banded together to hold us at bay. And Kumo? Kakashi asked, tilting his head. Their envoy is still negotiating and haggling with us. Their price was steep, perhaps steep enough to completely bankrupt Iwagakure in the long term, but ultimately, they too are more afraid of allowing us, with the resurrected Mangekyo and Mokutan, to run roughshod. In their minds, if they stand to the side and we destroy IWA, there will be nothing to stop us from turning around and annihilating them at some point down the road. Kakashi made a sound in his throat, closing his single visible eye. Irritating. Our response? Danzo questioned. The minor villages have deep, very old rivalries between them. Poke at them a bit. If we can break that unity, we literally break the shield IWA is holding between us and their borders when war finally does break out again. He turned to the other quiet occupant in the room. What about our standing forces? Tsunade shrugged. Our standing forces are around 85% combat ready. The other 15% are on leave. Recruitment has been increased as you ordered, so we currently stand near to our former prime. 1,287 active shinobi. If we were to do an emergency reserve draft, we could bump that number by an additional 300 to 500. If we were to do a general civilian conscription, well over 3,000 would be eligible, but they would not be fit to even begin molding chakra for at least a year. She slid a folder his way. Still, it's good to have a backup. He slid the papers to his side, barely glancing at them before he turned to Danzo. How's the situation with the Uchiha clan? Calming. At long last. The war hawk nodded. The political turmoil and inter-clan politics have finally begun to simmer rather than boil. Uchiha Fugaku has lost much of his political muscle. His influence in village affairs diminishes with his control of the clan. I don't share your vendetta against the Uchihas, Danzo. The silver-haired man sighed. Frankly, I don't care about political influence. What I need to know is that the Uchiha factions won't spontaneously start killing each other in the streets again. Similar to our confrontation with IWA, both sides have cooled their rage into small, cold wars. Kakashi nodded. Good. The resurgence of the Mangekyo had developed at least one massive problem within the village. Being the Kekei Genkai of the Uchiha clan's founder one of the most powerful bloodlines ever seen, which had been dormant for generations, it was common sense that anyone that activated and mastered it as Itachi had, would cause ripples. But nearly breaking the clan into civil war was a bit more than a ripple in Kakashi's mind. Apparently, the Uchiha clan as a whole had long been chafing under the restrictions of the clan elders and the archaic rules of the clan leadership for quite some time, similar to the Hyuga main and branch houses. Itachi had taken that slowly widening crack and ripped it open to reveal a wide bleeding schism. Both sides were using her as the figurehead for their respective objectives. The reformists of the clan, those who wanted to be allowed to venture outside the compound, not have their spouses chosen from within the clan, not be forced to live where the clan head designated, nor give a tithe of their earnings to said clan head, pointed to the fact that Itachi had been in exile in all but name from the compound, and the power she achieved beyond their walls and training. The traditionalists of the clan pointed to the fact that Itachi was the product of a marriage between Uchiha Fugaku and the clan heir Mikoto, and that her awakening of the Sharingan was clearly due to the selective breeding that had distilled the heir that could inherit Madara's legendary Sharingan. There were, of course, a lot more intricacies and politics at work, but that was the gist of it really. Personally, Kakashi believed you should be allowed to live wherever you wanted and marry/screw whoever you wanted, but he wasn't an Uchiha. Thank goodness. Both parties constantly petitioned Itachi to choose a side, but the young woman pointedly ignored both. He couldn't blame her. The only reason they even looked her way was in search of a weapon to bludgeon the other side into submission. Even so, he'd almost had to order her to interfere to bring this to an end when the Uchiha had all but started a small civil war within the very walls of the village, with clan members butchering each other in the walls of their compound. Danzo's Rudumbu were the ones that responded first to the crisis, killing the instigators and corralling the others. The old man was harsher than Kakashi preferred, but it was preferable to having a full-blown riot in the nobles' quarter. He gave them a warning. Just one. Reach an accord, or he'd reach it for them. Neither side had been happy and neither side could reach an agreement. So, rather than have two family members that couldn't stand each other living in a confined space, he decided to grant the reformists their wish. They were free to leave. But in so doing they would lose all rights, privileges and protections the clan offered to its members. After all, it was only fair. If you weren't gonna live by the established rules of the clan, why should you receive the privileges of a clan and have the clan foot the bill for your supplementary expenses? Fair made him by far the most disliked of the Hokage in living Uchiha memory. He'd even taken the spot from Tobirama. And last he checked, the Nidaime had quite the soft-spoken hatred of their allies. Even with his orders, it didn't stop the Uchihas from squabbling in the streets, with some merchants denying services to known Uchiha deserters, whose calls were also met with slow responses from the police forces, or loyalists if the shoe was on the other foot. Frankly, if they didn't stop making trouble, he was seriously considering disbanding the clan entirely, or at least putting the police force under someone else's control, like the Hyuga. If he did, he may have to look out for a rock to get thrown at him in the street, or a knife. But that just came with the job really. He decided to take his mind off of the troublesome clan and focus on something slightly more cheerful. What news from the capital? He turned towards Orochimaru. Prime Minister Kotaro has said that he is fully prepared to muster 20,000 men to fight at the first sign of trouble. The majority of his potential fighting force is dealing with the harvest, but he will make do. The three northern fortresses that border Aim and Takigaki are fully manned as it is. Any attack will give us plenty of warning to respond. He's finally consolidated his hold then. The last holdouts of resistance to the far east of our territory formally surrendered 3 days ago. Again, he turned to Danzo. What evidence did you find of their backing? As you suspected, Iwagakure was funding them. There is no direct evidence, but there is enough of a pattern in the money trail to allow us to make an educated guess. He nodded. Sounded about right. The longer it took to secure the daimyo's seat, the more money, men and resources it sucked from their future war effort. That, no doubt, played quite a factor in allowing IWA to win the diplomatic race to secure allies along the border countries. Lastly, he turned to Tsunade. We have a force of 7 potential combat essential shinobi, including yourself, Orochimaru and myself. What are the status of the remaining 4? Her lips pursed, clearly displeased. They are ready, but I still must protest that you're thinking of them as combat essential. Duly noted. He answered pointedly. She sighed. Dan is combat ready. He can fill any one of our roles, save mine as the head medic to a respectable degree if we are injured. Though not a single shinobi, the team designated as Konoha's Vipers are also prepared to enter combat on command and take any mission of a rank or higher, particularly assassination. Sasuke is the only shinobi in the village with medical skill that is approaching my own with a combat proficiency to match. Hinata-san, as you know, has dash. Your and Orochimaru's apprentices are very talented. Kakashi nodded. As is Hinata, she's on her way to becoming one of the youngest Anbu on record. But you know none of them are S-class yet. You know what I'm asking, Tsunade? Please don't make me pull teeth. She closed her eyes, lip curling into a sneer. Akane is fully prepared to enter combat. Her training as the Yambi Jinchuriki and as a shinobi under Naruto are proceeding rapidly, or so I've been told. The Godame nodded, and allowed her the courtesy of moving on from the subject. The status of Naruto and Itachi? As per your orders, one of them is in the village at all times and they both receive regular checkups every 6 months. Tsunade organized a stack of papers before sliding them to him. Physically and psychologically they're both fine barring some minor flags on the psychological side, but no more than our average jonin. Naruto himself arrived late last night, I believe, from his latest mission in Suna. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, smiling. Did he? I haven't read his report. You would have if he'd arrived early. She shot back, making him grin sheepishly. It's on your desk. Danzo decided to cut in, his voice soft and grave. By all accounts, we have an estimated time period of no less than 10 days, no more than 2 months, before our war starts again, either by our hand or theirs. He who strikes first strikes twice. Orochimaru practically purred. Kakashi clapped his hands, as though trying to dispel the talk with cheerfulness. 2 of the 4 people in here were far too eager. All right then. Tossing a look to the others in the conference room, the Godame Hokage nodded. If there's nothing else, I think we're done for the morning. Sasuke Uchiha's features were calm, almost serene, a sharp contrast to the chaos roiling around the 16-year-old at that particular moment. Explosions, fast-flying weaponry, streams of fire, whistling wind and animals of unusual size were tearing the forest around him apart. He didn't let it disturb him, even as the concussive force of the blasts ruffled his hair. He needed to practice an entirely new, original technique. Sakura wanted to measure how far she'd come along in her training. Frankly, it was a win-win for the both of them, and training alongside her again, after so long training apart from one another, was a delightful change of pace if he were perfectly honest. Tsunade was a good sensei, one of the best, but training alone was incredibly dull. He sensed something enter within his range, just the briefest of disturbances. His hand lashed out, lightning quick, kunai blade slicing through the air and cutting into something that squeaked and vanished in a puff of smoke. A pulse of chakra, a warning to Sakura he had to move. He stood, long legs taking him to the treetops as he peered through the canopy of leaves, watching as Sakura switched tactics to something more defensive, falling back to where Sasuke knew she had set up some traps using earth clones. The forest came alive, 3 hawks and 2 lizards the size of dogs rushed after him, the reptiles crawling across the forest floor and the birds circling overhead. Found you! Sasuke felt his lips purse, feet crashing into the tree branch with enough force to make the thick wood creak and groan, coming to a complete stop. He closed his eyes, searching with his other senses before he thrust out his hand, 2 fingers pointing and firing off a thin, straight spear of lightning, hitting the tree and coming straight out on the other side. Not bad. The voice was behind him. He felt the tip of a kunai pressing into his spine. But you really should learn to differentiate the chakra of a summon from a human. Out from the other side of the tree trunk he'd pierced came a snake, large and hissing. Its weight would be similar to hers, hence his confusion. Clever girl. He sighed. Good to know. You meanwhile should try to learn how to tell a clone from the original. He gave her half a second to digest that before he smirked and shoved himself back onto the kunai, the pointed edge piercing his body before the whole tree went up in flames by an explosion. Hundreds of yards away, well out of range of the battle and actually nearing Konoha proper, Sasuke sat cross-legged, observing the plume of smoke as his chakra flew out of his hands and into seemingly empty air. He allowed the technique to waver a moment, then reached down slightly to write another bullet point on a page. Increased distance, increased chakra cost. Effectiveness may also vary. Question test subject. Harg! The shout caught him off guard, and this time, when he scrambled to his feet and leapt to avoid the attack, he was rather ashamed to admit it was with little of the grace his clone had demonstrated. Of course, his clone wasn't potentially on the receiving end of a very powerful, deadly, spinning storm of wind chakra rushing across the field to bisect him. The spinning wave of chakra passed beneath him, curved and whirled back around to get caught in the hand of Orochimaru's second student. Ryoko grinned, teeth gleaming as her eyes shone with predatory glee. Found ya, Sasuke-chan. His feet touched the ground with barely a whisper of sound. Congratulations, was his dry praise. Oh, don't be like that. Ryoko smirked. You led Kyofu and me through quite the runaround and kept Lil Sis in the fight for a lot longer than she had any right to be. We're not done yet, he declared. In truth, while he'd primarily been looking to test his technique, a physical confrontation was not wholly unwelcome either. Sakura wasn't the only one who wanted to test how much progress she had made through training, and Ryoko was one of the stronger shinobi he could have asked to test himself against. He took his fighting stance and watched Ryoko's grin widen into something that would be more fitting on her sensei's face. She attacked first. She always attacked first. The custom from a shuriken, which had once been so awkward and unwieldy for her, now fit her size perfectly. She whirled it up and over her head, the reach of the weapon extended by whistling wind blades. She was taking it easy on him. He's seen moments where she moved faster than this. He dodged the swing of the spinning blades, but despite her not using her full speed, he just barely reacted fast enough to avoid the follow-up back kick, the heel of her foot brushing his hair. His fist cocked back and released, aiming for Ryoko's exposed ribs. She blocked, and while he felt like he was punching solid steel, she was thrown back, the force of his punch driving her away. He noticed the grimace on her face making him smirk as her feet dug themselves into the earth to stop her movement. She whipped her hand, shaking off the pain. Pretty good for someone who can't master Tsunade's strength technique, came her backhanded compliment. He tried to hide his irritation. By far the most vexing aspect of his training was his inability to master Tsunade's legendary strength. Even after years of dedicated practice, the most he could do was adapt the technique to suit the chakra control he did have. It increased his strength by at least threefold, but he wouldn't be shattering mountains anytime soon. I manage, he bit out, and then smirked, deciding to return the favor. Still can't master half of Naruto's wind techniques? The silver-haired girl's features twisted into a scowl. And here I was taking it easy because I like you, Sasuke-chan. He smirked, pleased that the verbal jab had gotten under her skin. There was a voice coming from the forest, and Sasuke knew the match was over. I can walk, damn it! Sure. You've been captured by enemy ninja, no back talk. Ow. You walked over that rock on purpose. And here comes that gnarled root sticking out of the dirt. You BOW! Sasuke sighed through his nostrils, waiting a few seconds until the group appeared. From the foliage, Anko came first, dragging behind her a hog-tied Sakura who seemed about ready to start spitting fire at the woman. Behind the two of them came a giggling Hinata, followed by a wryly grinning Kyofu. Welp, Anko declared with her signature cheeky grin. Mission failed, your partner was captured and you're surrounded. A 4 vs 2, where Sakura was able to survive fighting Konoha's Vipers, +1 for 12 minutes. He shrugged. I'd call the technique a success. What are you gonna call it anyway? Kyofu asked. And how does it work? Can someone please untie me? Shoo, prisoners speak when spoken to. Anko was enjoying this far too much. It's a modified chakra transfer seal. I was inspired by Tsunade's slug summons that could do something similar. But not every medic has slugs. But every medic can have access to seals. Naruto helped me design it. It allows a medic ninja with enough control to heal the recipient remotely. Constantly, it also increases their speed and strength. Only downside is I have to remain still to pull it off. I believe it's good enough, but anyone without my own skill at genjutsu is going to have a much harder time. Finding you in the forest was a pain. I had to summon so many allies. Kyofu nodded to herself. If I could find a way that would allow the technique to be done while moving, it would be perfect. Don't think so. Ryoko piped up. Sasuke turned to her with a frown. She held up her hands. Hey. I ain't saying the technique isn't good. It is. But this shit is only gonna work for you, Uchiha. How so? Have you seen you? She deadpanned. Or more specifically, have you seen the bullshit reserves you have next to most medics? Sasuke-chan, sweetheart, I hate to tell you this, but it's only out of sheer stubborn bullshittery and crazy that you've become as good of a medic as you have. Your chakra control is refined to a razor's edge for your reserves, but most medics just don't have that. How many other medics do you think you'll get that can make this technique last for 12 minutes and not look like they're about to keel over, dead? Tsunade and fuck all. That's who. His lip curled. Apparently. I've made an oversight. He reluctantly admitted. The only other medic besides Tsunade that could come close to matching his reserves was Shizen, and his chakra capacity dwarfed hers by nearly double. He brought his hand to cup his chin. Perhaps I can refine the seal to be less chakra intensive. He mused aloud. You do you, boy toy. Ryoko shrugged, hooking her weapon onto her back. Anywho. I'm hungry. Who else wants something to eat? Sakura is buying. I am not. Then stop me from stealing the money from your wallet. As Sakura screamed in frustration, Sasuke had to reiterate Enko really was enjoying this far too much. He also had to admit that the pinkette had expanded her repertoire of choice insults by quite a bit since he last heard her go off. Marching down the road about 20 minutes later, Sasuke listened as the Konoha's Viper Squad bickered like squabbling siblings, with Enko insisting on dango, Ryoko demanding sushi, Kyofu trying to get everyone to calm down, and Sakura spitting mad that Enko had taken her money. He tried not to roll his eyes, and tossing a look to his right he caught sight of Hinata's wry, amused smile. You got an opinion on where you'd like to eat? He asked. She made a few signs, eyes closed, looking equal parts resigned and amused with everything. Not enough opinions for you, Sasuke-kun? He shrugged. Don't see why we can't have one mo dash. He trailed off, onyx eyes peering past the Hyuga heiress and apprentice to the Godame and down the road to their immediate left. Hinata blinked, turned to follow his gaze as Sasuke called. Sakura. His one-time teammate turned, still pissed at Enko and fully prepared to take it out on him, given the tone of her voice. What? Calmly, he pointed. He watched out of his peripheral vision as her face twisted in confusion before she wandered over, following the direction his finger, along with his and Hinata's eyes. He knew his teammate well enough to shift his pointer finger away from the task and press it against the ear closest to her. 3-2 Akane-chan. His ears were thankfully spared from the squeal. Down the road, Akane's head swiveled around to search for the voice, blinking in confusion before she smiled with a brightness that lit up the street, waving enthusiastically with both hands, shouting Sakura and his own name at the top of her lungs, the shock of red hair still as wild and untamable as ever. It was longer than he remembered. She grabbed onto someone, Hyuga Hanabi if he recalled correctly, and pointed enthusiastically before literally dragging Hinata's younger sister through the streets towards them. The sight made Sasuke's lips curl into just the faintest bit of a smirk. The youngest member of his old genin cell always did have a knack for softening his taciturn nature, even if the only person he'd ever admit that to was himself. By his count, she nearly ran into 3 people in her excitement, but by the end she made it to them unscathed, Hanabi looking like she was about to fall over from vertigo. Sakura! Sasuke! She let go of Hanabi and, much to Sasuke's surprise and quiet chagrin, she nearly rammed her skull into his gut as she glomped him, knocking the wind right out of his lungs. The tiny redhead squealed as her arms wrapped tight around his waist. He barely had time to pat her affectionately on the head before she let him go and hugged Sakura just as enthusiastically. She, however, was more prepared and returned the hug with just as much enthusiasm. Hinata-ne. Hanabi nodded respectfully at her elder sister, the picture of propriety. Give your sister a hug, Hanabi! Akane hissed, reaching over with her foot and using it to shove the smaller Hyuga forward. Hanabi turned with a glare, but before much more could be said Hinata reached forward, grabbed her sister and lifted her into the air, her legs swinging as Hinata gave her a very over-exaggerated hug. Sasuke had the feeling she was doing it more to enjoy Hanabi's discomfort at the show than anything else. Hi Hinata, let me go! The nude Hyuga princess shook her head, rubbing her cheek against Hanabi with a wicked glint in her milky eyes. Apparently even the Hokage's personal apprentice wasn't above childish antics. Oh hey! Munchkin's back! Ryoko finally took notice. How'd the mission go, kiddo? It went great! She beamed. Soon at night is so pretty and different. The sand looks like an ocean of purple, the lamps set the village glowing like a bonfire. It was really amazing. We met the Kazekage, it's that guy from the exams. The one that fought Hinata-chan in the Kumo Chunin exams. Gaara! Sakura gasped, but he's our age. He must be exceptionally powerful then. Kyofu called as she approached with Enko. Either that or Suna was really short on good shinobi. Ryoko laughed. Nah, Gaara is really strong. He asked Naruto-sensei to help him test some of his techniques or something and he made the whole desert move. Sure kid. She laughed. I'm serious. You know. Kyofu interrupted before the two children could start having a shouting match in the middle of the street. It occurs to me that if Akane-chan is back, it stands to reason Naruto himself is back. We could always pay him a visit. It's been a while. Unannounced? Sakura questioned. We can announce ourselves when we get to the door. Ryoko enthusiastically declared. It occurred to Sasuke later on, as they marched through the streets, that he'd never actually been to Naruto's house. Oh sure he knew where his blonde sensei lived in a general sense. If he had to find him in an emergency he knew the address and district, but he'd never actually been there himself. He'd never had a reason to go. The neighborhood was a bit on the seedier side than he was accustomed to and he had to wonder why Naruto hadn't moved out. Ever since he showed that he could pull off the Mokutan he was regarded as one of the village's strongest and most prestigious shinobi. The missions he took ranged from everything to high A rank and priority diplomatic work like going with Akane to Sunagakure. He should be able to afford a much better place. In the end though, it was none of Sasuke's business. If Naruto wanted to live in a hovel at the edge of the woods like a hermit, it still wouldn't be his business. His one-time sensei was a big boy, he could take care of himself. Even so, marching down the road with an assortment of kunoichi, by the time they reached the building Sasuke could tell, almost instantly, that this was the place. Fresh paint on the walls, signs of recent construction work. It looked far fresher than the ones around it. Perhaps someone had decided to renovate the neighborhood now that a Mokutan user was living here and refusing to leave. They marched up the stairs to the third story, and it was Ryoko, because of course it was that banged on the door, shouting, "Room service!" very loudly. Curiously though, the third-floor hallway was cut off at the first door. All the other floors had at least 4 doors to them. Did Naruto enjoy a penthouse or something? Might explain why he was comfortable enough to stay. His sharp hearing picked up footsteps on the other side of the door, different from Naruto's heavy tread. His curiosity was raised. And then his brain came to a screeching, crashing, flaming ball of wreckage and ruin as the door opened to reveal none other than his sister standing at the door, shaking off the vestiges of sleep as she straightened a full head of bed hair. What the fuck? He only realized he'd spoken aloud when the whole group collectively turned towards him in surprise. Itachi raised an eyebrow. "Hello, little brother." Minutes later, before he'd even gotten halfway through the explanation that Itachi had been living with his dead man of a sensei for years, Sasuke found himself being grabbed in a hold by Sakura and Akane, the pinkhead's arms locking his own in place as Akane tugged him by the waist. All the while he struggled to wrap his hands around the nervous-looking Naruto's throat. "Hold on, Blue Pepe! You can't go killing our sensei because you want to play protective brother today!" Sakura complained. "I'm not going to kill him. I just want to talk," he promised. Repeatedly. "With my surgical knives! Would it be any better if I said you're completely overreacting to this?" Naruto nervously ventured. "No!" Ryoko shouted from the kitchen. "Don't buy it! She's been living here for years and they've been playing hot Uchiha Mama for as long as I can remember." The look of open dismay Naruto shot towards the kitchen was eclipsed by Sasuke going very, very still. Sakura and Akane shared a nervous look. The tranquility that was the calm before the storm was broken only by the sound of Itachi from the kitchen serving food to the other 4 kunoichi. "More rice?" "Yes, please." Just a handful of feet away, Ryoko, Kyofu, Hinata, Hanabi, who had been dragged along, and Anko, who had invited herself, sat at the kitchen island, nibbling on fruits and various leftover bits and pieces as Itachi prepared herself a breakfast. "You know I'm teasing and everything," Ryoko mumbled, hand over her mouth for some modesty as she kept chewing. "But seriously, have you guys dash? I don't see how that's any of your concern. He's my teammate Uchiha. And you are his. Doesn't mean he goes brazenly asking about your current shared residence plus bedmate dash." Kyofu coughed, blushing scarlet from her neck to the tips of her ears. Ryoko, however, stayed on the mark. "Hey, that's not exactly a no now that I think about it." Further discussions were interrupted by the sound of an attempted homicide occurring just beyond the kitchen door. Kakashi had just sat himself down, ready to continue his day. There were many papers that had to be filled out and signed. He would have preferred to go home really, but the day had at least 3 or 4 more hours before it was done. Perhaps Anko would surprise him and visit 2 days in a row. He did no more than take his seat when he suddenly realized there was something here that should not be here. "Hi, Kakashi-sensei." "Naruto." He began slowly, sensing the around him shift in clear surprise. "What are you doing under my desk?" "Hiding, sensei." In truth, in this life he hadn't taught Naruto much of anything. Frankly, using the young man as a training partner had sharpened Kakashi's skills considerably. He truly did have a vast repertoire of tricks and a creative mind that could give Nara a run for his money when it came to thinking on his feet. But it was apparently a habit that made Naruto feel better, and he didn't have the heart to make an issue on the comparison to his other self. "I can see that," he drawled slowly, looking down at the blonde tucked under his desk. "From what?" "Sasuke found out that me and Itachi are living together." Kakashi's eyes boggled in surprise. "Wait, you've been living together for years and he's only finding out now?" "That's what I said," Naruto protested. "Damn. He just got cloned 23. Kakashi turned his head to look out the balcony, finding a plume of black smoke slowly rising out from Training Ground 9 off to the east. That was quite a big fire. He blinked and turned back to Naruto. "Well, at any rate, could you get out from under my desk? He won't look in the office anyway, and I need to get some work done. And speak to you about your latest mission. You just don't want to read the report," the blonde accused. Kakashi smiled, a little sheepishly. "You're here already." The blonde mumbled about lazy, stupid sensei and something else about the Hokage needing to work and something about why he had written the report at all. He finished by the time he sat down. Kakashi made a show of sliding his chair into place, legs nestled comfortably in the spot Naruto had occupied moments before leaning forward, elbows on his desk, fingers clasping together in front of his masked mouth. "So," he began. "What happened in Suna?" "I made Gaara's seals better." He smiled. Kakashi nodded. "Yes, Naruto, that's what you were meant to do. Improve his seals, cement your friendship, make the alliance stronger." He made vague circles with his hand. "I need some details though. Not just the broad strokes. How powerful and precise did you make the seals? How much control does he have over the Shikaku's powers? By your estimation, how close is your friendship? How does Akane measure up to Gaara-san?" Naruto sighed, the sunny disposition vanishing as the questions and their implications gnawed at him. Truly, Kakashi couldn't help but consider fate to be cruel to the boy. He was arguably among the top 3 ninja within the village, with incredible power, but Naruto just wasn't someone with the mindset to be a ninja. He wanted to protect everyone, and he wanted to treat them all like they were family, even when they were from different villages, and the world just didn't work like that. There was no such thing as a talk no jutsu. To make foreign enemies do what you wanted because you wanted it. Plotting and preparing for the eventuality that one day you'd be enemies was essential. But even as softly as they were doing so here, it just never sat well with the boy. Gaara's control of the Shikaku has substantially improved. From the 5 seals he had before, I've cut it down to 3. They're easy to release to access more of the Shikaku's power. His aggression is increased at each stage, but he's still himself, so to speak. I spent a lot of time making sure Shikaku's influence couldn't bleed into Gaara's conscious thoughts. So unless he releases the 3rd seal and his upper consciousness completely shuts down because he gets knocked out or something, he will never lose control. His range on the sand control is substantial, and increases exponentially with each release. By the 2nd stage he can probably blanket Suna in a sand dome. You couldn't curtail that? Kakashi asked. Naruto didn't look pleased. He's my friend Kakashi-sensei. He's a Kage of a rival power, Naruto. He sighed, waving away the argument before it began. What's done is done. Akane's training? She's doing great. He smiled. She's been going more and more into her seal to speak to the Yambi. The Bijou is slow to trust, but she's winning him over. I can tell. The Godame nodded. Frankly, he wasn't sure about this whole befriending the Bijou methodology. He'd never heard of any of the Jinchuriki doing such from any of the nations, but Naruto assured him it would give the most powerful results as opposed to simply forcing the beast and stealing its power. Even so, Akane's training, by virtue of her mother, her father, and Orochimaru, was not an issue he could force even if he wanted to. Whilst he received the position of Hokage over Orochimaru and Tsunade largely due to the fear that neither of them would be able to put aside their personal feelings for the good of the village if it came down to utilizing the Jinchuriki as a weapon. He was under no illusions regardless. He had little doubt that if he ever went too far, he might just have a full-scale revolt on his hands between Tsunade, Dan, Orochimaru and Naruto, who never had any qualms about making his opinions known either. So, for now, best avoid that particular primed landmine and trust Naruto to do his job. On that cheery note, he focused on Naruto again, his voice dropping just a bit into something more serious. War with IWA is inevitable. You know that, right? He frowned again, his lip curling as he looked away. I know you don't like this dash. It's a waste, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto. He stressed. Your masked man might not even exist. A lot of the things you said have checked out, but he's not one of them. It doesn't change that this isn't necessary. They killed Magajiro-sama Naruto. Even if I wanted to, I can't ignore that. And even if that wasn't a factor, they want to destroy our home. You're friends with IWA Ninja. I understand you believe the war is a pointless waste of lives. I understand that too. But I need you focused. You can't sit this one out on the sidelines. That Sachikage has been preparing for this, for you and Itachi. My spies are reporting hand-picked assassination squads whose sole mission in this war is to eliminate both you and her. It was a cheap manipulation. There was little doubt in anyone's mind that Itachi had become one of, if not the most important person to him. He would fight if she was in danger, and manipulation or not, none of what he said was untrue. IWA and Kumo were gunning for both Naruto and Itachi. Hell, they were the whole reason half the bloody world had allied itself against them. Purely to take them out of the picture. None of the rival powers wanted a world where the Mokuton and Sharingan walked the earth again. For a long time, Naruto stayed quiet, taking a slow, deep breath to break the silence. I will defend Konoha. Kakashi allowed himself to nod. That would have to be enough for now. Hours later, as the sun began to set, and Sasuke finally seemed to be tiring, Naruto returned to his home. Marching in through the balcony door, he found Itachi sitting at her favorite chair, book in hand. Enjoy your run? She asked with the barest hint of a smirk. He scowled. You enjoyed that? He accused. I get your dad and the rest of the Uchiha, but why did you never tell Sasuke? I gotta sleep with one eye open tonight in Chan. It never came up. Why didn't you tell him? She raised an eyebrow, quietly ignoring his use of the age-old nickname. It never came up. He admitted mulishly, scowling even more as she let that smirk turn into a smug smile. He sighed, letting it go. Even if he had actually been mad, it's not like he could ever stay mad at her. You hungry? Between the two of them, he was the better cook. More out of sheer practice than anything. Itachi hated to cook. She'd do it, and she'd do it well and without complaint, but he noticed long ago it wasn't a task she relished in. She nodded. Yes, please. Anything in particular? Tempura. He nodded, making his way to the kitchen. Passing her by, her hand reached out, grasping his. You all right? He shrugged his shoulders, smiling down at her. Sure. Why wouldn't I be? You went to Kakashi's office. He didn't want to ask how she knew. Knowing him and you, he gave you a lecture on your responsibilities towards the war. And now you're sad. Has he been giving you the same speech? He doesn't need to. Rather, he's been asking me to keep speaking sense into you, lest you forget and do something stupid. He let out a sigh, more a puff of air really, the sound in his throat conveying his frustration. I get it, really. If I have to fight, I will, but neither of you can make me enjoy it. Don't let your emotions get you killed, she demanded. Would be rather inconvenient for both of us. Just inconvenient? He smirked. Getting the apartment in my name would make hiding from the clan so much more difficult no matter how many genjutsu I trap them in, she bemoaned. Actually, now that he thought about it, the last Uchiha guy that had tried to tail her home was still wandering around outside the walls according to the memories of his clones today. On the other hand, I would have more closet space, she said. He pressed a hand to his chest. Alas. The walk-in closet is not enough. You want my little corner closet too. And all the expansions we bought through the floor. She rolled her eyes, briefly squeezing his hand before letting go. Go and make us food. And these incessant demands. He gasped as he walked away. You can't even spell incessant. She shot back, smothering a smile as she returned to her book. Chapter 69. How does one explain it? How could you possibly say, even think of telling others that you've been given credit, that your whole social status, everything you've built and gained over the last few years is based on an act that you never actually accomplished? Her name is Kuratsuchi, granddaughter and daughter of previous Tsuchikage, wielder of Konoha's red blade, and killer to Hai no Kuni's murderous daimyo. That's the story they told. That's the story everyone believes. A lie. Necessary for everyone. But none knew any better. Kuto's last words to her, his warning of traitors, claims to innocence. With his murder right in front of her eyes, it gave those words, those warnings, all new weight that had stayed with her for all the long years since. Someone had wanted their villages at war. Someone wanted this senseless, pointless bloodshed. But how to tell them that? How to even think of telling anyone that their respect for you, or more, their lack of hatred and open mistrust was based wholly on a lie? She couldn't. As much as she wanted to. If she did, the best she could have hoped for would have been a pseudo-exile, to return to her status as a pariah in her own home. At least here she could try to stem the tide, slow down the relentless march towards another war. She'd succeeded in some measures, failed in others, but the march would not be stopped, the craving for revenge, for retribution. And, judging by the gathering here, it looked like the Warhawks would finally get their wish. She recognized the faces of everyone present, and each of them reinforced the notion that this would be anything but a simple gathering to discuss the daily running of the village. Daisuke, the Umbu captain. Hirotaro, head of the treasury. Asami, head medic. Akatsuchi, her longtime friend, who had been placed in charge of overseeing their standing Chunin forces. And finally, herself. Her position was more ceremonial, political, but she had secured the one true victory they could hold to their name against Konoha in this conflict. Daughter and granddaughter to Kage, one of the few that knew the layout of the capital and the palace. She had a voice, even if it was half strangled. The door opened and in marched their Kage. Mochizuki Chiome, the first kunoichi of their village to rise to the rank. She was tall, with a willowy grace about her. Rumor had it she was distantly related to the Naidame, but being not only bastard, but also an orphan, made it difficult to say. Kuratsuchi had never seen her fight. Few living had. But records did say she'd been a general during the Third War, young for such a high position. She'd even fought the Yondaime Hokage herself, and survived, as evidenced by the single, jagged piece of kunai dangling from her neck. A fragment of the Yondaime's signature Horatian technique she kept ever since. Then she'd landed herself in prison. What she'd done to earn the sentence, or what had happened to have her released, was classified to virtually everyone but the village elders, the daimyo, and the woman herself. And none seemed to be in any particular rush to share. So far, though, Kuratsuchi could say that criminal history, whatever it was, had not affected her work ethic. She had repaired much of the damaged infrastructure left by Hiruzen Sarutobi's infamous raid, opened trade with nearby Tsuchi-no-Kuni villages, brokered deals and loans from the daimyo and other nobles of the court, was the driving force behind the diplomatic gains they'd made to acquire alliances with the lesser villages along with Kumo, doubled their recruiting drives and expanded their training regiments, bringing their numbers back up to something that could be held to some form of standard. For a greater village in record time after their crushing defeats at the hands of Konohagakure. Chiome sat down with a sigh. Dark hair, straight like a sheet of ink, shrouded one eye, dark onyx staring at the lot of them with a cold sort of indifference before turning her attention squarely onto Hirotaro, head of the treasury. How badly has our deal with Kumogakure affected our reserves? What reserves? Hirotaro scoffed. Between their demands, the massive withdrawals made for classified purposes, expanding our military and repairing our infrastructure, we're basically borrowing more heavily than ever from the daimyo. We need to start allowing higher-ranking missions to take place more frequently. Daisuke shook his head. Konoha has been selling intelligence on our jounin, our ambu, and even our hunter ninja. Sending them out with their information floating on every wind and available to every nuke-nin and enemy force is just asking to have at least a third of our elites killed before we ever even see the first battle. Another result of Hiruzen's infamous raid. In all the years since, she doubted that anything, not even her grandfather's and father's deaths, had plagued the village quite so thoroughly. Knowing all of their most forbidden techniques, the identity of their ambu, the secrets of their hunter ninja, Konoha had been selling information to the highest bidder, reaping the benefits while others nipped at Iwagakure like 1,000 tiny ants, killing them one bite at a time. We can't sustain this level of spending without a supplement for much low. How long then? Chiome interrupted, leaning back in her seat, one foot crossing over the other. Pardon? How long before we have an economic crisis? Hiritaro released a huff, trailing his eyes skywards, thinking. 1 year. At best. He answered gravely. This war needs to either be finished in 1 year, or we need a miracle to avoid a total economic implosion. Then we have little time to waste. She nodded, turning her eyes to Akatsuchi. What's the status of our main force of Chunin, and how soon can they be ready to be deployed to the fronts? Well. Akatsuchi swallowed thickly, visibly gathering his composure. Our forces are, as of right this moment, at a little over 70% combat ready. The remaining 30 are out on low-risk missions, or medical leave. There are 3 divisions of 200 Chunin apiece ready to be deployed to any of our allies along the border, and 1 more for reserve action to be used as reinforcements. Send out the call and the Chunin on mission can be called back in no more than 4 days. She nodded before turning to Daisuke. Our Anbu and Jounin? Getting fat and bored. The man snarled. We're all prepared and eager to have another crack at Konoha. This time, we won't lose to their Mokutan, or their Sharingan. The Shodame, Nidame, and even Sandame all wrote on methods to combat these bloodlines. We've dusted them off and memorized it, every one of us. They are the largest threats, no doubt. Chiom nodded. But Konoha is not limited to just them. The Blood Wolf, the Death Dealer, the Green Beast, Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Uzumaki have each taken apprentices, with Uzumaki's apprentice being one of Konoha's Jinchuriki. Each are powerful in their own right, so do not allow your pursuit of them to blind you to other threats. The captain nodded. Understood, ma'am. Same. She nodded to the head medic next. We'll be pitting ourselves against Tsunade of the Sannin. Her expertise has allowed Konoha to grind the opposition down by attrition before. Will that be a problem this time? I don't think so, ma'am. Asame was, in Kuratsuchi's opinion, not cut out to be a front-line shinobi, and it showed. Whilst she had a brilliant mind for books, medical or otherwise, she had never gained the attitude or the skill to reach for anything higher than a chunin. In the hospital room, the woman was brilliant, with a steady hand to go with it. But here, staring down the most powerful ninja of the village, her insecurities and inadequacies were showing, glaringly. She cringed and fidgeted under Chiom's stare, stuttering through her report on the improvements and expansions made to Iwagakure's medical corps and the best methods the troops could employ to possibly make Tsunade's job significantly harder. Poisons that were difficult to detect, weapon designs meant to maximize infection, and other things of that nature. Chiom took it all in with silence, and the occasional respectful nod, before informing Akatsuchi that he should designate a handful of the chunin to implement these methods. Which then prompted her hapless friend to try, discreetly, to write down some of the suggestions for later, lest he forget. What should be our strategy? It was only when she saw all eyes turn to her that she realized she'd been spoken to. She had to turn her head, looking at Chiom with her one eye, the blind spot left by her damaged one making Kuratsuchi miss when the woman turned to her with her cold gaze. You're asking me? You were the victor of the Monsoon Plains. And you do know our enemy Kuratsuchi, do you not? I only know 2 Konoha ninja. She bristled. How their Kage thinks or acts is beyond me. Nevertheless. The woman shrugged. I'm asking you. She grit her teeth, feeling the trap tightening around her neck and not knowing what the hell to do about it other than bloody well answer. She looked down to the map of the nations carved into the table, working her jaw as she pondered the best course of action. Finally, she nodded to herself. Send the 3 divisions of Chunin to our allies in Kusagakure and Takigakure. Kusa is the weaker between the 2, so send the odd division there, rather than splitting it. Leave aim for the time being. Why? She asked. They are the staunchest of the 3 in their support. They're also the least defensible. Kuratsuchi countered. Konoha will attack through there. They've done it before. They'll expect to just march through, and they will, then you send in the reserves. Taki to the north, Kusa to the south. The 2nd Division in Kusa can be used to conduct raids within Hai no Kuni, and the reserves push in from our own borders, surrounding whatever force Konoha sends to aim on 3 sides. That's assuming they're foolish enough to send everything to aim, and not attack the 3 villages at once. If they do that, their lines will be thin. We would call in the reserves to reinforce aim, ask the daimyo to send his men, and then contact Kumo to sweep in from the northeast. Suna could do the same to us from the southwest. That's why the 2nd Reserve Division is in the south, in Kusa. She tried not to look smug. Not to mention the Jounin and Umbu will be holding on to here for emergencies. The woman nodded. Decent enough. And if it fails, I'll be the one held responsible, Kuratsuchi mentally sneered. Chiom turned towards the others. I want our every soldier and resource prepared for war in exactly 15 days' time. Understood? Yes, Tsuchikage-sama. They chorused. She remained silent, a fact she regretted as some eyes turned to her, but not enough to speak the words. The Godame nodded. Very well. You're all dismissed. Kuratsuchi dash. She stood plucking her hat from the table and placing it over her head, dark eyes looking to her. Come with me. She felt a spike of trepidation lance through her gut. The remnants of her left eye itched with a dull pain that she had to fight the urge to rub at through the cloth covering it. The look Akatsuchi was throwing her way wasn't helping. She stood, the feet of the chair scraping the floor as Chiom marched past her towards a side door. They marched away from the group, leaving through the labyrinthine hallways that led deeper into the mountain behind the Kage Tower. She tried to smother the apprehension stirring in her chest. Tell me, Kuratsuchi, do you think me your enemy? Their footsteps were loud. They'd long since abandoned the tiled floors of the tower, and had delved deep into the mountain. Emergency lights hung intermittently through the caverns. The dirt was dry beneath their feet, the rock around the walls dark granite. Why are we here? She asked instead. I wouldn't blame you if you did. Your grandfather and I did not get along. Her voice was strange, wistful with an undercurrent of venom. As though she was remembering an ill wish. The granddaughter of Ryotenbin planted her feet and did not take another step. Why dash? She bit out. Are you dragging me down here? Chiom had walked ahead, 3 paces at least before she looked over her shoulder, noticing Kuratsuchi was no longer following her. It's part of the task I'll assign you with, of course. There are some things even the highest-ranking ninja seldom see. This will be one of those things, she said, an easy smile coming to her face. It made her shiver. Kuratsuchi crossed her arms. You're right. I don't trust you. I do see you as an enemy. Chiom's head tilted, like a snake examining prey. Are you refusing an order from your Kage? Are you giving me, perhaps, an excuse? She grit her teeth. The Godame snorted. If I wish you dead by murder, I'd hardly have told half my staff, publicly, that I was meeting with you in private. This is a part of your mission. Now come with me and stop testing my patience. Her voice left little room for argument. She didn't bark or snarl or hiss, but there was an undercurrent of danger that the IWA princess could feel. Like a knife grazing lightly at the back of her neck. She marched on. Years ago, the woman said as Kuratsuchi reached her side, locking step beside her. Your father asked you to hand over all information you had on Uchiha Itachi and Naruto Uzumaki. When it was discovered they used some sort of mass illusion technique to beat back our main force, correct? She nodded. He did. And I did. She'd faced plenty of heat already for supposedly hiding the fact that they had the Sharingan and Mokuton bloodlines. Your father planned to form a team with you, possibly as a member to hunt the two down, but then the Chunin exams and Amigakure presented themselves and altered those plans. She remembered. It would have been a team of his best Umbu, the Umbu he ultimately placed in the ambush that had ended with his, and Kutu's, death. I'm planning on putting those plans back on track. You are still the one that knows those two the best. So your presence is needed. You want me to be part of a team? She asked, raising an eyebrow. And for that you had to drag me down here? I believe you'll understand the need for secrecy once you meet them. She smiled. Kuma will be making their own. No one wishes for a return of those cursed bloodlines. The sooner they're destroyed, without heirs, the happier all will be for it. They reached a door. Simple maple wood which she shoved open, and Kuratsuchi found on the other side a well-lit room. It was the people inside said room that made her freeze. You can't be serious, she whispered, horrified. We are. His heavy tread, the sheer size of him. She didn't know how he could have snuck up on her in so confined a space, but he'd managed. Han loomed over the both of them, his entire right arm now of thick, red metal, not unlike his armor. His face, what little could be seen, a litany of scars, and the mask now doubling as a breathing apparatus as his chest rose and fell with a mechanical sound of gears and machinery. Meet your team, Kuratsuchi-san. She didn't have to look. She could hear the woman smirking. Far to the south, in the dilapidated corpse that was the city of Amigakure, a blue-haired kunoichi was folding paper cranes. Origami had been a hobby of hers for as long as she could remember. Paper cranes were so ingrained into her fingers she could fold them behind her back and with eyes closed faster than most others could at all. They were said to grant wishes? They never had. No matter how many she folded. But still she folded them, if for no other reason than to keep her hands busy in these moments of laxity, where the plans had been set and the battles couldn't be fought yet. The deep breath before the plunge. Her fingers ghosted over the pages listening to the pitter-patter of rain drumming its chime against the metal of the building. She looked at the paper crane. White folded to perfect angles. Picking it up, she held it in the palm of her hand, staring at it, chin resting against her fist. Am I making the right call? It wasn't the first time she'd asked herself that question. The things she'd done for all these long years, trying to help drag them out of the muck. They weighed on the part of her mind that still considered herself a person, and not the extension of someone's will, fighting for a memory. The little crane gave about as much answers as it did wishes, and she let it drop from her hand to listlessly fall to the floor. Chapter 70. Like any sentient creature, each of the 9 bijou had personalities. They could learn, laugh, feel sadness, grief, anger, the whole tapestry of the myriad of emotions one would consider human. But they were not human, they were entities of chakra. Demons born before the shinobi world came into being, and each and every one of them had a flaw, something within them amplified to its most destructive form. Shikaku's flaw was his bloodlust, something that bled into outright insanity. The need to destroy, to consume like the desert sands would to anything that stayed in them too long. The Nibi had its laziness. Even towards the very end, when Yujito had been fighting with Haiden and Kakuzu, it hadn't mustered the energy, or the will to bring its full power to bear and burn Haiden to cinders, only bringing out its full energy when Yujito was simply too wounded to continue. The Sanbai, cowardice. The Yambi, rage. The Gobi, envy. The Rokubi was manipulative. The Nanabai, vanity. Gyuki, at least before B befriended it, was greed. Constantly tearing into the hole in his previous container's seal to feed his need for destruction, battle, freedom, or anything else that suited its fancy. And finally, Kurama. Kurama's fatal flaw had been his pride. His arrogance. But each of the bijou had their virtues too. Gyuki was compassionate. Considerate. More so than any of his siblings. Shikaku, though twisted by his insanity, was protective. And Kurama was loyal. Once you broke past his pride, his anger and arrogance, Kurama was the most trustworthy and long-lasting of friends. Naruto knew that the flaw was easy to invoke, easy to take at simple face value. But you had to dig in deeper with the bijou. Show them, after so many years, that the side that wasn't meant for battle could be entrusted with them, their Jinchuriki. To trust them enough that they could be partners. Akane could do that. Every week, at least 3 times, she would visit the Yanbi in her seal, something she could do now after so much practice, practically at will. They struck up conversations, and through her he learned that Son Goku was incredibly curious, and also an incredibly quick learner. This was evidenced by his time spent examining, dissecting, and ultimately recreating Tsunade's legendary strength from the month or so he spent sealed into Akane while she was still in the womb. He liked challenges to his intelligence, be they riddles, philosophy, books, or games like chess. Akane had spent almost a month entering her mindscape to recount the pages she read in certain books. A long, tedious affair that he doubted he would have had the patience for had he been in her shoes. Her sealed design didn't allow for the ease of communication he'd shared once upon a time with Kurama. But she did it, spending hours upon hours of her day falling in and out of meditation to help the bijou read a book she didn't particularly enjoy anyway. Before ever using his chakra in training, she would always go into the seal and ask for permission. This practice had been met with denials more than once in the early days, and still resulted in them when the Yambi was feeling particularly moody. But day by day, week by week, he could see her chipping away at years of grudges and defenses. A drop of water wearing down a jagged stone to something smoother, easier. When he saw the beginnings of her chakra shroud becoming something more than simply raw, fiery energy and restrained rage, that's when he knew that she and Goku were both ready for the last step. He just had to make sure. Naruto grinned at his last remaining full-time student. Hopefully, after today we'll never have to do this again, he said, dipping the brush into the sealing ink. What exactly are we doing? She asked. You've never had to draw a seal on me to meditate and go meet with Goku-san. I've never gone into your seal to meet him, have I? She blinked. What are you talking about? You talk to him all the time. I always take you both into my seal. He clarified. This time, I'm going into yours. Oh. She looked like she wanted to nod. So that's why we're always in a sewer when you're there? Yup. He nodded. My seal's different, so the design looks different to our minds. Why a sewer? Beats me, he admitted. She was satisfied enough to fall into silence, allowing him to finish. There. He smiled, pulling back the brush and sorting his equipment away. All done. She rolled her eyes upwards, as though trying to see the seal drying on her skin. He sat down across from her in the lotus position, her following his lead. All right. Let's get started. By far, the worst part of being the Hokage, in Kakashi's opinion, were the ceremonial events. No matter what it was, no matter how important it was, he always felt he could be doing something else, something more important. Either going over strategies, tactics, reading through intelligence reports, something. But this was important, even if it was being carried out in the strictest of secrets, and would ultimately add yet another issue to his already overflowing plate. It was morning by now, he knew. But he doubted his guests had seen the sun for days now. The secret entrance to the village was hidden by a myriad of multi-layered genjutsu such that all the Hyuga in the village couldn't have a prayer of seeing through it, or even detecting it. Anyone who stumbled onto it without the blood seal of the daimyo or the Hokage would, at best, find himself utterly turned around for hours. At worst, killed, his mind utterly shattered by the myriad of illusionary and ninjutsu failsafes that kept it secure. It was different for everyone as far as he knew. Hiruzen's notes said he had seen a wall of fire he'd had to cross, feeling the heat burning at his skin. The daimyo of Hai no Kuni at the time of Hashirama had claimed he'd drowned before coming to. All reports conflicted as to what to expect when you crossed the veil. He wondered what precautions his guests had taken for the package. He didn't have to wonder for much longer. They stumbled onto him, fingers holding an unlit torch, grasping at the smooth stone walls that made the passageway. When they saw him, they jumped, the last layer of the genjutsu falling away to allow them to finally see untampered reality. Kakashi looked them up and down. Disguised as Suna traders, he observed. Clever. The man in the lead straightened, clearing his throat. Hataki Dano. Kakashi recognized his voice through the mask, nodding. Prime Minister. He bowed slightly, as was respectful. As was expected. An honor. A second person marched forward, then a third, and then a fourth at last, carrying a small child. The child's face was covered just like all of theirs, but Kakashi could see dark hair peeking out from her headwear, chocolate brown eyes looking at him with a disquiet sort of fear, hugging the neck of the one holding them. Kakashi smiled as kindly as he could. Hello there, he said. Are you Sasami? The child, who couldn't have been much older than 5, 6 at the most, peered at him with curious, guarded eyes, fingers clutching at her protector. Was it the intelligence, or the caution she'd inherited from Kutu? He let his smile widen a bit for the girl, straightening before panning his eyes to the remaining people. Masks off, please. None of you will enter the village unless I see you first. Kotaro shifted where he stood, clearly surprised, or displeased, or both. Kakashi didn't much care. He held all the authority in the land of fire, with the Fire Lady being little more than a toddler, but he wasn't the daimyo. He could suffer through Kakashi's paranoia like everyone else. As one, the group removed their masks and turbans, and Kakashi nodded, pleased at the choice of guardians Kotaro had picked for this journey. Genma Yugago. He turned to the last, smiling thinly. Captain Sarutobi. Kakashi. Sarutobi Asuma nodded. Kakashi's smile fell at the man's voice. Since the death of Kurenai and his father so close to each other, something had broke inside of Asuma. The same way it broke within him, and within Hinata. He couldn't claim to have dealt with his grief the best, not by a long shot. It was only through first-hand experience that he felt he could claim to have helped Hinata at all in that first grief-stricken year after the Battle of the Monsoon Plains. But Asuma had pulled away, removing himself from the village, renewing his vows to the Fire Guardians, escaping Konoha and the memories inside of it. Frankly, he wasn't sure if the man wanted to be reached. Still, this was neither the time, nor the place. He turned his attention back to Kotaro. All right, come with me. The march back through the cavern was no less disorienting to the new arrivals than their previous ordeal had been. Labyrinthine passageways and sharp, geometric shapes that twisted and wound in a spiderweb of winding halls was the last layer of defense. He memorized the steps, rather than the number of turns, because even to his keen mind, The maze was simply too confusing to navigate by anything other than sheer drilled-in arithmetic of counting one's steps. Finally they reached the end of the maze, standing now at a seal array. Kakashi had to form the final string of seals to release the lock. They each vanished in clouds of smoke, reappearing in the garden of what had once been the Shodame's home. The grounds were overgrown, the house long abandoned, preserved by shinobi keepers and historians for educational and sentimental purposes. The Godame Hokage nodded, the village's northernmost wall looming behind him. I have a feeling I know what this is about already, but why don't you spell it out for me, Kotaro Dano? Kutu's nephew nodded. A Wagakure will target the capital in this war, or at the very least it is highly likely. If they infiltrate the palace they will have 2 targets. I wish to deny them at least one. You think the village will be safer for her? No one will be looking for a single shinobi mother, and her nameless child within the village, and should anyone discover her identity, she is surrounded by the best guards that can be afforded. Kakashi nodded. The plan had merit, but the thought of tying down 3 jounin that could be used in other theaters of the war didn't sit well with him. Unless. I understand. If this were to be done, however, I would request that 6 of the 12 guardians be placed under my command until the mission is complete. You would take half of the guardians? Their duty is to protect the fire daimyo. If she will be under my protection, so I need their strengths on the front. He answered simply. Kotaro's eyes narrowed. You would refuse this mission if I said no? Kakashi winced. Damn. I will grant you 3. He nodded towards Yugago. Yugago-san has already agreed to pose as the parent, bringing the number up to 4. I trust this is agreeable. Not what he'd hoped for, but not needing to devote a squad to her protection was better than they'd started with. He nodded. That will suffice. He stopped, and felt his spine stiffening on its own. They all stilled, even Kotaro and young Sasami, who clutched a little tighter at Yugago's neck. After all, even for those without training, this kind of presence isn't something you can be oblivious to. He turned, trying to find the direction the chakra was coming from. Not far, 5, maybe 600 meters, eastward, training ground 17 perhaps? What is that? Kotaro asked, frowning grimly. I haven't the faintest clue. He refrained from saying. Let's go see. He said instead. Her seal was a cage framed in a room of dark granite. Son Goku sat within, chained and collared, all 4 limbs bound by the seal. His fur a bright red crimson, almost unnatural in its shade. A visitor. The bijou rumbled, its lips twitching to the semblance of a smile. You did not tell me I should expect a guest, child. Perhaps I would have cleaned up the place. The Yambi grinned at his own joke. Naruto smirked back. While he'd seen the bijou a handful of times in his time training Akane, she was the Jinchuriki here, not him. For all intents and purposes he was, at best, an acquaintance. At worst, an intruder. Sorry Goku-san, Naruto-sensei didn't tell me in our last training session either. Akane admitted sheepishly, scratching at her cheek. Well? Why have you come here then, sensei? The title was delivered with a sort of mocking, like a grandfather indulging a child that said he was all grown up. He didn't take much offense. Compared to the bijou, they were all toddlers really. I'm here, he said, stepping forward to stand slightly between the two, smiling at his youngest student. Because I believe we're all but done. Done? Akane blinked. Done. He nodded. All of your training, everything I can teach you on how to be a Jinchuriki, it's all done. The last piece of the puzzle rests with the 2 of you. He heard the chains clunk and rattle. Goku leaned forward, one fist rising for him to rest his chin against in curiosity. The last part of being a Jinchuriki, he continued, requires that both the bijou and the host trust each other. It's not one force overpowering or dominating the other, it's not taking or giving a piece of power for a moment. Your chakras must become a single force. But I already trust Goku-san. Akane answered slowly, blinking in confusion. It's more than that. What this is... He paused, trying to remember, to put his own memories to words. You have to have no fear. Not one bit of it. He nodded, taking note in the next second to not speak his name. He didn't have that right. When Yambi-san gives you his chakra, you can't fight him, even though your body wants to. You can't try to take control of it, rather you have to accept control of it. Yambi-san similarly can't hold back. He can't say I'll trust her with 3 tails or 2. He has to be willing to commit all of his strength. He looked towards the bijou. Not an easy thing. I know. The ancient demon's lip curled in something akin to a thoughtful frown. Finally, the beast straightened. Chains rattling around him. Girl, leave us if you please. I would speak with this one alone for a moment. Akane seemed startled. It must have been the first time, or at least the first time in a long time Goku had asked, or forced, her out of the seal. Oh, okay. She faded away, like mist in the morning light, and Naruto was left in her seal space staring up at the red mountain that was the Yambi. You will answer my question, boy, before I do anything for you. The monster rumbled, his voice low, an edge of hostility in the undertone of his voice. The former Jinchuriki nodded, though he wondered what he could have done to cause the hostility. Then tell me, boy. What has happened to my brother? What has happened to the Kyuubi no Kitsune? Naruto felt his breath catch, hitching his chest before he let it out in a slow exhale. He knew. Of course he knew. Compared to the Bija, they were all toddlers. It is faint. The beast rumbled. A fading touch. Nearly gone. I can hardly sense him anymore. But I recognize my eldest brother's hand over you. You will tell me what has become of him. Of all the questions. Naruto shook his head. Not sure you'll believe me, Yambi-san. I will decide what I believe. Speak. He was certain everyone across the village could feel this. He could feel alarms and chakra beacons going off at the edge of his senses, feel the forces mobilizing to investigate. He doubted it was an attack. Too telegraphed. Too obvious. Even as a decoy, this wouldn't be ideal. Yugugo had stayed behind with the princess. Kotaro had insisted on following. Whether it was to sate his own curiosity or determine for himself the defensible nature of the village, Kakashi neither knew nor particularly cared. Asuma and Genma were at his side. Their job was to protect the Prime Minister more than him, of course, but it was still good to know they were at his back. The Umbu detail he usually had was forced to be dismissed to preserve the secret of the hidden entrance. As they neared the training grounds, Kakashi could detect another presence, almost smothered by this, like a moon hiding behind a blazing sun, and he started to form an idea as to what exactly was going on. The Bija stared at him, features somber. I'm sorry, Yambi-san, he stated with as much emphatic sincerity as he could inflect into his tone. We Bija do not die easily, boy. Frankly, I was unsure it was possible for us to die. It admitted, frowning gravely. I will not believe my brother is dead until I feel the last of his essence fade from my senses. Despite himself, despite everything, Naruto felt a spark of hope in his chest. Can you sense him? I can sense him, as one would sense the air. Or the water when submerged. The Bija shrugged, its chains rattling. We each of us knew something was wrong, I'm sure. We knew something had changed. None of us expected our brother to be lost in time. Not even sure what he did. Naruto shrugged. I designed the seal, but there was so much that was just unknown. In hindsight, we're lucky it worked as well as it did. Very well, my curiosity is sated and I am satisfied that there is no plot to destroy me. Let us get on with this then. Naruto blinked. Plot 2, you have to trust Akane. I do. It is you I did not trust. My brother's essence clings to you. And that seal of yours draws in chakra like a void. For all I knew, Kurama had placed his trust within you, as you would have me do with her, and you erased him from existence. Naruto shook his head. He understood how one could reach that conclusion, but it still angered him. Kurama was his friend. Never. The Bija shrugged unapologetically. Naruto returned to the waking world with his student poking him in the cheek. Sensei? Sensei? Are you back? He smiled, grinning up at the red hair that glowed like flame in the noon sun. I'm back, he said quietly, forcing his usual cheerfulness and bright smile just a bit, just enough to hide the emotions his conversation had brought up within him. He sat up, feeling the grass and soft earth under his fingers as he placed them on the ground, smiling at the curious Akane. All right, let's get started. She nodded, taking a few steps back. Her usual distance whenever she trained to draw on Goku-san's power. It's just as it always is, he said, standing up. Reach inward, find Goku-san, and ask for his help. He knows what he has to do, the burden is on your mind and soul. She took a deep breath, letting it out in a huff as she rolled her shoulders. Okay, she said to herself. She looked around. Naruto-sensei? She asked without asking. Naruto made some seals, placing his hand on the earth, Winding pillars of wood sprouted from the dirt. You don't need this, he said, smiling at her. You can use it as a safety railing if it makes you feel better, but you don't need it. If you did, we wouldn't be taking this step. She looked unsure, seeing the green chakra suffusing the air around the wood like a beacon. Soothing and comforting, but not brushing against her chakra coils at all through her flesh. She nodded. All right. She reached into herself, hands held in a seal in front of her to help her focus. Goku-san? She received an answer. Goku's chakra flooded her insides, molten metal and fire coursing through her veins, surging behind her eyes until they glowed like red-hot coals. A chakra shroud covered her body, followed by one tail, then a second, and a third. The center of her chest glowed like a furnace. Accept it, Naruto called, his voice distant, nearly drowned out by the blood pounding through her ears. Your body is trying to fight it, instinctively thinking it's an intruder. You have to trust that Goku-san doesn't want to hurt you, even when every reaction and every instinct is telling you otherwise. He is your friend. She tried to listen, her brows scrunching up in concentration, teeth gritted as her body held itself at the edge of pain, feeling her insides lit like candle wicks. He watched her, shoulders tense with anticipation, but not in worry. Not yet. Then, he saw the lines on her face ease, her hunched shoulders sagging slowly as she relaxed, the roaring inferno around her body becoming a steady flame, the last of the third and the beginnings of the fourth tail appearing. Good. Trust that he doesn't want to hurt you, ease away all your worries, direct your chakra to flow through your coils at his pace, add to the current of the river rushing through your body. The chakra shroud's color shifted, changing from dark demonic red to something lighter, clearer. I feel. He heard her voice, stopping him from repeating the last words of advice. The fourth tail formed. A pulse of chakra boomed out of her, the power of herself and the bijou in perfect synchronicity. The shroud rippled, the deep blood red becoming a fiery orange, blazing like an inferno of fire as her wild red hair whipped about, caught in the upswell of power as her body gave a lurch, like she could suddenly breathe again, eyes opening wide, looking at her hands and body as though seeing them for the first time. Naruto recalled his own transformation. Gold light and black markings, Kurama's chakra becoming light and warm, feeling like he'd caught the warmth and power of a sun and clutched it in his hands. Akane looked like a living flame. He could see her, and yet not. Her skin was a darker shade, almost sunburnt but not quite so unnatural, her hair a blazing dark orange. The glow of a furnace trapped in her chest spreading to her limbs in faint, barely noticeable lines before they bloomed to other points of light along her wrists, knees and ankles, the light cutting through her clothes. We feel, she said, revealing that her voice too had been changed, her usual childlike tone now overlapping with a much deeper baritone. We can feel this, she said, making Naruto tilt his head in curiosity. Yanbi-san? He wasn't sure if the seal would have allowed the bond to break through for physical sensation like it did with him and Kurama, but if it did, all the better. Although, it might be a little more than just physical sensations. We? Me? She shook her head. Both of us. I am me, but I'm also Goku-san. She looked confused, but not distressed. Gently, he shook his head. No. You're Akane. Goku is still within your seal. He can feel what you feel, your body is where he finds the sensations. But you aren't him, and he's not you. You're working together, not the same person. You have to remember that. She blinked again, confused, before the fog seemed to clear in her eyes and she righted herself, nodding. Looking to her hands again, he saw her fingers clench. I feel like I can split the sky open or something. Not surprising, he said. Like this, you instantly jump from something like a really good chunin to probably one of the top shinobi in the world. She smirked. Something wicked, prideful, and feral in her eyes that he wouldn't have seen on her expression. Stronger than you, sensei? Hey, he warned with mock anger. Don't think because you got some glowy parts now that the student suddenly surpassed the master. Can we find out? She was asking. It was good that she asked. Showed a measure of control. No doubt Goku was raring to battle after so long cooped up in his cage. He shrugged, smiling widely. I actually got a few things to practice myself. Kakashi was the Hokage. It was a title that meant a great many things. That he was responsible for the lives of all people within the village. That he was the overall military commander of the village's military force. That he was one of the top political figures in the world. But more than anything else, the title, Kage, to most meant that you were, beyond a doubt, the strongest ninja within the village. And in that regard, Kakashi felt that his title was a little more ceremonial. Oh, certainly he was powerful. He knew that he could fight anyone in the village with a solid chance of winning, even Orochimaru and Tsunade. But marching into this clearing, he felt like history would remember this as a time when men walked with legends. The chakra radiating through the air was so thick, heavy and cloying like a foggy mist, it sent a palpable heat across his skin and a static tingling across his senses. The fight, to his eye, was almost artistic in its beauty that could only be matched by the few times he'd seen Itachi and Naruto training together with his own eyes. Akane's movements were wild, full of a savage sort of beauty that one could appreciate in a catastrophic storm. Her body and chakra were the primary cause of this disturbance. Wildly different, and by the looks of things several orders of magnitude more powerful. Naruto, by contrast, was like a stone, a mountain, unmoved by the storm. The gentle eddies of his Mokutan and the chakra that let him tap into what Kakashi had long ago learned to be sage mode was a calm lake next to the raging firestorm that, while seemingly playing in this sparring match, was leveling blows that could split boulders in two. What is that? The Prime Minister's voice held no small amount of awe in its tone, and judging by the looks and body language of the guardians, they were in a similar state. Others were coming too, he could feel it. A small army of Chunin and Jounin, drawn like moths to a flame. That, Kakashi deigned to answer, is our Jinchuriki minister. Chapter 71. Why wasn't I consulted before this? Kakashi shrugged. Frankly, I figured you'd approve. This is one of the best ways to keep her out of the front line. Which, if I recall correctly, you've been trying to do for months now. Tsunade scowled. Getting involved in the Hinokuni court is hardly much safer. She's not getting involved in the court. Kakashi sighed, aggravated. Honestly, this village was too goddamn small for so many S-class personalities. Each one of them, from Tsunade to Orochimaru to Itachi, seemed to think they knew better. The only one who showed any kind of deference to him was Naruto. And he suspected that was due to past experiences with his Kakashi. The village needs a strong protector in case of attack. The daimyo needs to be protected, incognito within our walls. Keeping Akane here accomplishes both these things easily. How many of the fire guardians is my daughter worth in the trade? Tsunade growled. As many as I decided she was worth. He finally snapped, glaring at her as he leaned forward on his desk. Let's be clear here, Tsunade. I think I'm a nice guy. Fairly easygoing to boot. But I am your Hokage. And my informing you as to how I plan to utilize members of my ninja force, which includes your offspring, is a courtesy. I respect you, even like you. But I'm not asking for permission. I am not consulting you. I am telling you. Am I making myself perfectly clear? As he finished, he glared at the head medic, receiving a glare in return. He saw the muscle in her jaw tense like she was gritting her teeth. Again, he had to acknowledge the fact that Akane was a linchpin that could completely fracture the relationship between himself and his S-class force. But the reality was he was getting fairly sick and tired of walking on eggshells around the last two Sannin in almost every respect regarding her. She was the Jinchuriki of the village. If he could free up a defensive force and keep her within the village walls to protect it, that was just good resource management. And if Tsunade didn't like it because she didn't want her daughter involved in Hinokuni politics, she was a big girl, she could suck it up. There were far worse things. So you called me here to what? Give me a dressing down. As I said, he answered slowly. I'm informing you of what my plans are as a courtesy. He offered her a shrug. We can keep being courteous after this, or we can be professional. Your call. Before anything more could be said between the two, a Chunin messenger slammed open his door, instantly putting Kakashi on edge. The man looked winded, sweating, holding a scroll in his hand and looking at him like he was bringing word that the sky was falling over them. Kakashi stood, holding out his hand, wordlessly commanding the Chunin to hand him the message. His eye passed over the report, tightening minutely as the only sign of his reaction. You're dismissed, he said, turning his back to the Chunin. He heard the man bow, turn and march out the door. What's wrong? He handed her the scroll. It won't exactly be classified for long. It seems we're officially at war. Come on, Hanabi-chan, cheer up. It's not that bad. Akane knew, intellectually speaking, that she was, especially given recent events, likely much stronger than the Hyuga princess. But even so, she couldn't help but feel a little nervous when those pale Hyuga eyes rounded on her with scathing hatred. I hate D. ranks. Akane! Hanabi snarled through grit teeth, seething where she stood with clenched fists. We have help though. The redhead tried to placate her scary friend, pointing out the obvious for other genin with them. Don't try to make this better. Hanabi snarled. It's still a damn D rank. Akane smiled a little sheepishly, scratching at her cheek as she chose to shut her mouth and follow the group. D ranks weren't that bad. Sure, they were chores and boring and they didn't pay very well, but honestly she could think of worse things. And this one sounded simple, helping someone move furniture to a new house. That was easy work. Of course she forgot that most genin didn't share her and her mother's sheer physical strength, but hey, details. She didn't know the other genin with them. She knew they'd graduated in Hanabi's class, but all of them were on the reserves list for the time being. Hanabi herself was being instructed privately within the Hyuga compound, but it made Akane wonder what exactly the Hokage was doing with so many genin on the reserves list. Maybe the war had drawn too many jounin away to teach, could be. The group walked through the village, embroiled in their respective conversations. By the time they reached the apartment complex, it was somewhat obvious where they had to go. Up on the third story, door flung wide, boxes everywhere with more down by the road near them. Akane looked to the assortment of moving boxes. Some were marked fragile, and it appears the person had gotten everything from proper cardboard hard boxes to vegetable crates to stuff items in and haul them across town. There were quite a few boxes that looked extremely heavy. She wondered who moved them here in the first place. Oh good, you're here. Akane's eyes trailed upwards, finding a woman, standing at the third story, leaning on the railing. She was pretty enough for some of the boys to mutter to themselves in surprise. She nodded down at them. Yuzuki Yudago. Nice to meet you all. Bring some of those boxes up and let's get started, eh? You can't be serious. Itachi's voice could have chilled molten metal. Naruto cringed. It had been a long time since he'd seen her angry, probably because she was easy enough, or strong enough, to go with the flow on most things that life threw her way. So thankfully, this wasn't a common occurrence, but when she did cross that line from mild annoyance to seething anger, well, even the Hokage didn't exactly look like the most powerful ninja of the village standing in front of her. Kakashi, to his credit, didn't flinch in the slightest. I do believe I am, he said, nodding towards the blonde. He is the best option for this. I'm not going to let you use him as bait, she snarled. Naruto cleared his throat, opening his mouth to speak. We don't have much choice. Kakashi shrugged. The northern border outposts are reporting movement. The battle groups I sent out there won't hold for an extended assault. Our daimyo's armies are still weeks away. Iwa's daimyo's support is likely much closer if they're prepared to attack in the coming days. A team led by Naruto is the only force of significant strength I can mobilize on short notice and give them a target to focus on. It'll let us consolidate our defenses. We also have reports. Itachi said, a tension easily discernible in the undertone of her voice. Many, that IWA and Kumo have put together a specially assigned team whose sole purpose is to kill or capture Naruto and myself, placing him directly at the front at the opening stage of the fight, when all their troops are still fresh, before wounds and sheer attrition wear them down as fighting a battle on their terms. You're handing them their objective. Naruto raised a finger, taking a breath to try and interject again. No. I'm making them focus on an objective. With AIM as a staging ground, they can attack anywhere along the northeastern border. We don't have the manpower to defend everything. Giving them a target will funnel them. You can do exactly the same by defending key strategic points. Let them win the first few skirmishes at the border, and when they commit to a hard target, you defend it. He tried a third time. They'll burn down half the countryside before they commit like that to any one target. It's no worse than they did in the last war. I fought in that war. I don't need the history lesson from you. Guys? Fourth finally let Naruto find his voice. As one, the both of them turned to look in his direction, and he winced at the heated glares he was receiving from both elite ninja. What? They snarled in unison. He really tried not to flinch, reminding himself that he could take both in a fight if he had to, probably, maybe. Anyone mind if I have a say? Go ahead. Kakashi nodded, only for Itachi to sneer. Oh yes, because clearly he's one to never volunteer for missions that can get him killed. I think Kakashi-sensei's plan does make sense. He held up his hands placatingly, convincing himself that her eyes had not flashed red. I can always run away if things really get dicey in Chan. Fine. She hissed. Then I'll go and be the bait. No way. He shouted and realized he'd stepped right into the very obvious trap. Why not? She shrugged. They need a target. The Sharingan is just as big of one as the Mokutan, and last I checked I'm just as strong as you if not more so. So I'll go. I'm not gonna let you dash. He clenched his teeth, watching as her lips curled into a satisfied smile. This decision isn't up to either of you. Kakashi sighs, visibly aggravated as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. Itachi is going to have her own missions. Our forces will be stretched too thin as it is to have significant forces held on standby in the village. What's my task? Kakashi's eyes swiveled to Naruto and back to Itachi. Classified. Akane watched as two of the boys struggled to negotiate a rather large table through the very small front door. She would help, but as far as she could tell they really were trying to impress Ms. Yugigo, and her lifting the table with one hand would probably interfere with that. It'd be funny though. She knelt down, placing the box she'd carted up here on the pile Yugigo indicated went to the living room. Marching inside, Akane was surprised to see someone she hadn't noticed until this moment. It was a little girl, sitting by the window in the only chair available right now, a folding table in front of her, practicing calligraphy of all things. Have you met my daughter? Akane turned, surprised at finding Yugigo at the doorway, smiling softly at her. Oh. No, I didn't even know anyone else was here. She's a little shy, Yugigo said, smiling as she leaned in closer. We only just returned to the village recently. She doesn't have many friends. You're not her age, but maybe you can help me get her out of her shell? She whispered, quiet enough for just them to hear. Akane blinked, looking to the woman then back to the girl. I suppose. She answered hesitantly. What's her name? Yuzuki Sasami. By the time they returned home, Naruto was making a decent impression of a guilty puppy following after its owner. He shuts the door of the apartment behind him before he asks the question. Are you mad at me? As soon as the question leaves his mouth, she rounds those dark eyes towards him. He has his answer without her having said a word. It's not like we didn't know we'd eventually have to fight at the front. He hedges. She turns away and starts marching towards the kitchen. That is not the point, and you know it. This mission is a high-risk waste for absolutely nothing in terms of reward. Just because it's hard to defend the outer territories along the border doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Yes. Try. Not overcommit. She shot back through the doorway. Her voice never rose, she never shouted, but he knew her well enough to know she was practically seething. The door on one of the kitchen cabinets was shut a little harder than strictly necessary. He winced, but forced himself to follow her towards the kitchen, finding her gathering tea leaves from the box. Hojicha tea leaves. Imported. She wasn't mad. She was furious. Itachi. He paused, unsure of what to really say. I don't want to leave with you still mad at me. It was the best he could come up with. She paused where she stood, taking a long, slow breath, visibly gathering her calm. I'm not mad at you. Not wholly. She amended. You're still the same idiot you've always been. Even without the order, you would have been first in line to volunteer to head to the front when news broke out. I know that, and so does Kakashi. I'm not going alone. He tried to placate again. I'm getting a full combat team, and a second group will be following in 3 or 4 days. That's beside the point. She shook her head, turning her eyes to him. The anger per se wasn't there. But she still looked stern. I don't mind if he gives you a dangerous mission. I would try to not hold it against him if you died carrying out an order of his. But only as long as the order has a purpose. If there's a point to it. Not. She shook her head, rolling her eyes as though thinking of the word. A stall tactic. The border outposts will be taken with or without you. The outer towns and villages will be burned either by IWA or ourselves to deny them resources. All this is Kakashi using your presence to give him time to reposition the daimyo's army properly. And that's important. I disagree, she said with such finality. He knew better than to try and keep arguing the point. She'd made up her mind. She set the tea leaves into the water, turning on the stove. She turned back to him, blue eyes meeting onyx black. He smiled, hesitant, nervous and hopeful all at once. I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't want to leave with you mad at me. He hedged again. Her lips pursed, pushing off the kitchen top where she was leaning, walking towards him. She pressed a closed fist to his chest. And he realized that he was at her eye level. When did that happen? You're an idiot, she said. But don't be stupid. I want you to promise me that. He smiled, nodding once. All right. Her fist opened to a palm, pushing him against the doorframe, holding him still. I want to hear you say it. Say the words. He smiles at her. A smile full of sunshine and gentle warmth. I promise. He's smiling at her. A smile full of sunshine and gentle warmth. Even as he's bleeding, looking like he should be dead, even as his body slowly regenerates, and her hands shake trying to heal him. He still smiles at her, a smile just for her. She's trying not to cry, to retch. Trying to ignore the countless dead around them, at the groans and screams of pain. Trying to focus on him, even as he tells her, Nay, Sakura-chan. I'll be alright. You gotta go help the others, they're worse off. They're not. His limbs look like little more than mulched meat. Even with Kurama, this was dangerous. She's about to tell him so. To scold him. She can feel the anger, the sadness, and the guilt twisting in her guts, forcing the muscles in her face to contort and tighten. She's about to scream at him. This idiot. This guy that keeps throwing himself at this, and then he just smiles at her like everything's alright. She snaps awake, sitting upright in her own bed. Cold sweat making her shiver, her whole body shaking as she brings a hand to her head. A dream again, another one. The first time she'd shrugged it off. It was easy then, she didn't know medical ninjutsu. Never studied it, or had an interest. Tsunade had mentioned she likely had talent given her fine control, but she was Orochimaru's student. She had survived and endured through his training, grueling and unforgiving as it was. She took pride in that. Sasuke was their medic. Sasuke was the one that found genuine interest in learning the healing arts. The one that felt fulfilled when he patched people up or did some massively complicated surgery. Not her. Everything else was wrong too. Her hair too short. Her build, more upper body and arm strength than she had, focus on punches. The equipment she carried, not enough razor wire. No poisoned caltrops. The way she molded chakra every time she moved or threw a punch. Nothing in these dreams were her, she couldn't do any of it, and yet, the first time had been easy. The following dozen were getting progressively harder. She stood from her bed, feeling herself weak in the knees, stumbling towards a glass of water she'd learned to keep by the table in her room, fingers shaking worse than she could remember, as she grasped it and took hold of the aspirin to stave off the colossal headache she knew would be coming in a few seconds. She gulped it down, barely even breathing, green eyes staring at absolutely nothing even as they were held wide open. She slammed the glass down with a deafening crack, gulping down air even as she felt she couldn't get any into her lungs. Her feet made her pace the room. She spun once and felt her whole world turn with vertigo. She gripped the banister of the bed, holding herself upright and stiff. She thought back on the dream. Another nameless battlefield, another horrible fight. Naruto. Naruto was, she forced the bile down her throat. She was a kunoichi, an experienced one that had made more than her share of mangled corpses through traps, techniques, and weapon usage already. Blood and guts were, they shouldn't matter. But none of them were Naruto. None of them were her sensei, her friend. The sight of his mangled arm, torn up by some technique he used was, she never wanted to see it again. Not for the first time, Sakura wondered if she should tell someone about her strange dreams. Could she call them dreams anymore? Would delusions be better? The thought of them thinking she was crazy was not an endearing one if she were perfectly honest with herself. Honestly, if she heard the story she might think the person was crazy. Sakura sat down, feeling the headache starting to kick in, fingers curling at her hair, another image flooding her mind of Hokage-sama ruffling her hair as a child. She'd never met him before the Chunin exams. Maybe in passing? Certainly not enough for him to be looking at her as a child with such fondness. She had to talk to someone. Naruto. Like it or not, he was always involved in the dream in some way. Maybe he had some answers? At the very least he could hear her out. Make her feel better like he always did. Tomorrow. She'd talk with him tomorrow. Chapter 72. The keys to the apartment rattled in her fingers, the lock closing with a resounding clack, as Itachi locked the door. The stairwell was narrow, almost claustrophobic, with barely enough room for her to walk straight given the width of the halls, even with her slender build. Her steps fell quietly on the floorboards, actually focusing on making some noise on the creaky floorboards as opposed to her habitual stealth so as not to startle anyone. It had happened more than once with her neighbors. Descending the stairs, she was surprised when she reached the front door of the apartment complex. Itachi found herself blinking at the sight. "Haruno-san?" Sakura squealed, jumping almost a foot in the air from where she was, trying to close and shake off an umbrella she was holding outside the doorway. Now that Itachi cared enough to notice, there was indeed a light drizzle still coming down. She noticed it when she woke hours ago, but she thought surely that it had stopped given it was so light even then. The weather seemed to disagree with her logic. Sakura turned, one hand pressed to her chest. "Oh, Itachi-chan. I'm sorry I didn't see you there." "Clearly." The Uchiha princess nodded, stepping forward. "I actually needed to talk to Naruto-sensei. Is he here?" Itachi shook her head. "You've missed him by a few hours actually. He's been given a mission." Sakura's features fell, the simple smile she held literally crumbling before the Uchiha's eyes, as her whole body seemed to slouch and slump. "Oh. I see. When will he be back? Do you know?" "Not for." She paused, feeling the anger bubbling in her gut. "Some time. Weeks at least." Any last vestiges of Sakura's cheer seemed to completely evaporate at that, so much so that even looking at her made Itachi feel some semblance of the misery that was now pouring off of the girl. "I see. Is everything all right?" She couldn't help but ask, raising an eyebrow. They weren't particularly close, but Sakura was Naruto's student/friend/teammate and Sasuke's own friend/teammate, so, by at the very least proxy, she had to try, or at a bare minimum make the offer. "Can I help in some way?" Sakura turned to her, blinking, and for a moment, it seemed like she would take Itachi up on her offer when she finally shook her head. "No. Thanks, Itachi-chan, but I don't think you'd understand." The Uchiha princess shrugged. "As you wish. The offer stands should you change your mind." She stepped towards the door, pushing it open and stepping out into the light rain. "I'm sorry you missed him, but I have to go and take my own mission now." "You have a mission too?" Sakura asked, and Itachi had to curse her momentary carelessness as she saw the comprehension dawn over Haruno's features as she realized what the full implications were at having both Naruto and Itachi taking a mission at the same time. No hiding it now, or for very long either. Tomorrow, the day after at most. She nodded and said no more, stepping away from the door and heading towards the Hokage Tower. Monsters. She was in charge of a team of honest-to-God monsters. "Something to say?" Kuratsuchi looked up, eyes meeting the sea green of a man she hadn't seen in well over a decade. Shinjin Tagamori was an old soldier, older even than her grandfather had been and one of the rivals to him for the title of Sandaime Tsuchikage. Years and injury had taken their toll. He walked with a cane and a limp now. Some old wound that had never quite healed. He was a thin man, almost lanky one could say, body taut with corded muscle and wiry sinew. He typically wore tight-fitting shirts of darker, solid colors, black, gray and such. A mustache and beard framed his aged face, and his hair was cut short and spiked through his hairline had scarcely receded. Some color still stubbornly clung to the roots. Officially, he was the leader of the team. Unofficially, she, and Umbu Captain Daisuke had to ensure their hired help could be controlled. She gestured to the files on the conference room table. Jinchuriki-han, Sasori of the Red Sands, Nagamasa the Weapon Master, our very own criminal Deidara, 2 S-rank invitees from Takigakure, one of which is a Jinchuriki. She listed off. This is less an assassination team and more like complete insanity. Even if the Mokutan and the Sharingan are both this ridiculously strong, hiring and releasing 3 S-class criminals is just fucking nuts. Shinjen nodded, making a sound in his throat. I understand your reservations, he admitted. Our charges are so far above us in strength, their loyalty, questionable at best. We have few effective means of control if it comes down to it. Even more than that, Deidara, Sasori, and Nagamasa are criminals. So was the Godame, he pointedly reminded. Kuratsuchi's teeth clicked shut. She leaned over the table, one hand holding up her weight, the other holding the bridge of her nose. Kyumo is also making their own teams, and an S-class and an extra Jinchuriki from Taki should be more than enough. She hedged. Shinjen shrugged. If all the advisors and the cold hard truth of economics did not convince her to not hire them, either you or I will have much luck. All we can do is work with the task and tools we have been given. Whilst I myself am no longer S-class, I am not far from it. I suspect the same can be said for Captain Daisuke and yourself as well. Our Kage at least had the foresight of drawing her selection from separate villages. Sasori from Suna, Nagamasa from Kumo, and Deidara from Iwa, of course. Furthermore, given his rather public statements about our Jinchuriki, Han most certainly does not like Deidara and will oppose him at every turn. That is something we can make use of. We need a team to fight the enemy, not each other. She pointed out, we need only hold them together long enough to get them in sight of either Uzumaki or Uchiha-san. He shrugged. After that, point them in the direction and let them work. They will either win or die. Either way, our problem will be over by then. A month, 2 at the most, he assured, taking a seat. I think we can manage for that amount of time. The war will be a short one, I suspect. She raised an eyebrow. Why's that? As I said? He shrugged. With this much power called to us, we will either win almost outright by overwhelming force, or Uchiha-san and Uzumaki-san beat them, in which case we have very little that can put up a fight anyway. Naruto always enjoyed Haino Kuni's forests. No matter where he went, be it Suna's beautiful oases, Kiri's gorgeous island paradises, Iwa's rugged wild tundras in the winter, or Kumogakure's splendorous mountains, the thick green woods were something special. Primal. More than home, they just felt to him like the way the world was meant to look, not just here but everywhere. Stupid. But it was how he felt, couldn't help that. He wondered now, though, as they made their way through this place towards the border outposts, if in a few months it would keep looking like this. He remembered how it looked, back then, when the whole world was falling apart around them. The forests had burned. What little had not been charred cinders and ash had withered and died, the very ground dried up and cracked. Maybe he knew then, looking at it, that the whole of the world was already dead without the forest. It just took a while to realize. This was not the same war. He knew that. But he had to remind himself of it. Because it felt the same. That same charge in the air, the deep breath, before the plunge. This didn't feel like the conflicts he'd faced in this world before. This didn't feel like children playing at war, throwing a schoolyard fight. No. This felt like a slow death. This felt like the air getting choked out of your lungs as you were squeezed. Victims to a constrictor. What's got you down, princess? The slap smacked him along the back hard, pitching him forward before he caught himself and coughed, smiling as he looked over his shoulder. Nothing's got me down. Just thinking, Ryoko-chan. His silver-haired teammate smirked, a pointed fawn gleaming at the corner of her exposed teeth. Thinking how much ass we're gonna kick now that we finally got the team back together. That's what you better be thinking about. I will admit, despite the circumstances, it's a welcome turn of events to have us all together again, Naruto. He nodded. Damn right. Whenever my team's together. His teeth gleamed in his smile. We can't be beat. It was the middle of the day, barely past noon. But to Itachi, it felt as though she were walking into the tower at the dead of night. Gone was the usual bustle of assistants, shinobi and civilians. Gone was the noise of clicking typewriters, of shuffling paperwork, the clack-clack of footsteps across hardwood floors. She wasn't sure if it was intentional or circumstance brought about by the knowledge most people in this building must have been aware of, but either way, it felt appropriately oppressive if she were being honest. The march up to Hitachi's office was a quiet thing. The Umbu guard standing by the doorway did not move a muscle as she approached and opened the door. Kakashi was there, as expected, sitting at his desk, chair swiveled to let him stare out towards the village and the beautiful day that overlooked it, despite the light drizzle of rain. He didn't say anything. If anything, she could guess that he was waiting for the other members of whomever her team would be for the assignment to arrive. No need to give the same briefing twice. Shouldn't be very long. She'd only arrived 5 minutes early. Still, 5 minutes was enough to satisfy her curiosity. This mission, He swiveled his eye towards her, peering at her through his periphery. Last night when I asked, you mentioned it was classified. And even though you've already assigned a team for it, you've waited for Naruto to be well and truly out of the village before breathing one word of it. He nodded. That's right. I'm afraid our... He paused. Favorite pacifist wouldn't exactly approve. Because I will be in danger? Or because the mission crosses that much of a line? Yes. He nodded, smiling. The smile fell away, and he turned his eye back to the village. What I'm going to ask of you might be one of the most important missions of the war. It will be extremely dangerous, and when you hear the full details, even you might not feel entirely comfortable with it. But if you carry out the assignment successfully, it will be a devastating blow, both in terms of the impact to enemy manpower, morale, and logistical stability. It's why I've chosen the people I did for the team. There was a flicker in her senses, a shunshin just outside the door, and she had her answer as to whom her teammates were instantly. I see, she breathed. This is quite a significant investment you're placing on this one mission. It's that important. The door to his office opened, admitting none other than Orochimaru and Tsunade of the Sannin. It's good that you're all here, the Hokage said, turning away from the village and back to his desk, lacing his hands in front of his masked mouth as he leaned forward. Now, let's begin.